Chapter 1430. Walking along the small path in the northern part of the city, there was a place that looked like a relay station less than a mile away. This place was connected to several main roads. Many people riding on carriages and strange beasts could be seen gathering here. There were also some small groups gathered here, waiting for everyone to gather before heading to their destination. There were also quite a few people who brought themselves here. After gathering with the group, the others rode on their horses or strange beasts while they ran wildly behind them. The group of people left behind a trail of dust. Yun-Nuoshing and the others watched the running guy disappear at the end of their sight. They looked at each other, and then Huey's cheeks trembled. Well, after all, the people in this world are a little weak, but at least some of them are strong, according to their own worldview. Young Master Shen looked around and fixed his eyes on a group of people. He walked over to the middle-aged man and cupped his hands. "Excuse me, how do I get to the northern temple?" The middle-aged man, who was resting with his back against the wall of the relay station, opened his eyes and looked young Master Shen up and down. Suddenly, he smiled and said, "I've never seen you before. Are you planning to go to the northern temple?" "Kind of." Young Master Shen had a perfect smile on his face. He said politely, "Sir, can you give me some directions?" The middle-aged man slowly stood up straight with a strange smile on his face. "I know the way, but I can't give you a specific direction. I can only tell you that it's north." "What do you mean?" Young Master Shen was stunned. The Northern Divine Palace is a very abstract existence. Although the path leads to the north, it doesn't mean that you can see the legendary place if you keep going north. There are many young people like you who want to go to the Northern Divine Palace. Every year, a considerable number of them will embark on the journey, but not many can come back alive. The middle-aged man wagged his finger and kept glancing at him as he spoke. If it's just a place that can be visited casually, how can it be called a legendary place? How can it be called a mysterious place? The person who told you about it definitely didn't tell you in detail about the relationship between the two places. Young Master Shen thought about it for a while. He linked the legendary Northern Temple with some rules and other things in his mind. He smiled and cupped his hands at the middle-aged man. "Thank you for the information. Then, may I ask, how can I get to the Northern Temple?" The middle-aged man suddenly laughed, as if he had been waiting for this sentence. He pointed at himself with his thumb and said, "Simple, just follow us." Young Master Shen was stunned. "I'm a guide. I've walked back and forth on this path many times. I've also seen that legendary place several times. Every time I see it, the scene is different. Sometimes it's on the surface of the water. Sometimes it's on the top of a glacier. There was another time when I saw it. There was a transparent staircase that rose from the ground all the way to the clouds. The temple was there." As if he knew that young Master Shen would not believe him, the middle-aged man went on to recount many scenes. His eyes revealed a serious and deep recollection. "Guide?" Young Master Shen pondered for a while and did not ask. He just stared at the middle-aged man's eyes and believed him a little. At least, he believed the look of recollection in the middle-aged man's eyes. It was probably because he had seen that shocking scene with his own eyes, that magnificent and sacred scene, that he had such a deep expression. But what about being in the same team? Young Master Shen could not help but look back at Yun-Nuoshing and the others. He could not help but smile bitterly. They were moving sources of disaster, and one of them was targeted by He was being targeted by something. Young Master Shen's expression suddenly became a little confused. This was the graveyard of gods and demons. They came in. Why did he come in? Why did they come here? Seeing young Master Shen's expression suddenly become dull, the middle-aged man was also stunned. He did not say anything too strange. How could he scare this young man out of the blue? Ahem. Actually, there are no restrictions if you come with us. Everyone in our group is going to the Northern Shrine. I'll lead the way, and the others are just staying together to look after each other. I'm just a guide. Young Master Shun came back to his senses and saw the middle-aged man blinking at him crazily. How could he not understand what the middle-aged man was hinting at? It was no different from saying it explicitly. Young Master Shun laughed bitterly in his heart, but he still looked calm on the surface. He smiled and nodded. Understood. I have something to discuss with my companions. Excuse me. The middle-aged man saw young Master Shun turn around and leave. He hurriedly said, "We are leaving before noon. You guys should hurry. You are leaving so fast." But when he saw that the middle-aged man had not gone far and was whispering with a few others, he suddenly smiled. He was not in a hurry. "Brother Yun, do you still remember why we are here?" Young Master Shun came back and threw Yun Nuoshing directly in the face. The latter was stunned. "I am here to look for that shadow. You were tricked by your friend to jump down. Have you forgotten?" Yun Nuoshing tilted his head in confusion. How could he forget such a thing? After a moment, his eyes sharpened. No, he might not have forgotten. Just like how he had always felt that something was off, young Master Shen might have had the same exact feeling from somewhere else. There really was something in the graveyard of gods and demons that was affecting them. After saying this, the three of them were stunned. Young Master Shen looked serious. In other words, the influence of the graveyard of gods and demons is starting to become obvious. You really don't remember why you came in? You can't remember even after I reminded you? Yun Nuoshing looked at him and said. Young Master Shen frowned and tried hard to recall, but his mind was a mess. He could not find any trace of it. He could not help but smile bitterly. I can't remember at all. The woman in green also responded. Like you, I have forgotten why I came in, but I still remember what happened here. Two balls of light floated out of Yun Nuoshing's body and landed on them. After a while, he shook his head. I can't find any specific traces of the influence. It might be a little troublesome. If you stay here like this, forget about finding anything, the two of you might forget some things first. Besides, this process has already begun. How about this, I will send you guys out first. Yun Nuoshing tapped his palm and said as an idea came to him. Send. How do you send us out? Young Master Shin was stunned. Ever since they entered the graveyard of gods and demons, they had not found any obvious exit. This is an independent space. If it is damaged to a certain extent and its integrity is reduced to a certain extent, it can be exposed in the real world. At that time, you can casually make a hole for people to pass through. But if you come out of that hole, you don't know where you will be thrown. You might be thrown into the void. Yun Nuoshing shrugged. Anyway, we can't die in the void. It's just a little troublesome to go home. It's nothing. Well, I'm just saying. The choice is in your hands. If you don't want to go out, I can't throw you out, can I? Young Master Shin smiled bitterly. He lowered his head and thought for a moment. Then, he looked at the woman in green. Seeing that she was looking at him with a determined gaze, she said softly, Wherever you go, I will go. After pondering for a while, young Master Shen let out a long breath and looked at Yun Nuoshing. Let's move on. Before they decided to go to the northern temple, they used the golden energy crystal to locate them again. The light from the crystal pointed to the north. They did not know if it was leading them to the legendary place. The small movement here only attracted the attention of some people in the courier station. It did not cause any trouble. Young Master Shin told Yun Nuoshing and the others what the middle-aged man said. The latter thought for a moment and did not think there was any problem, so they agreed. The main reason was that they knew almost nothing about this independent space. If they wanted to find a legendary place that they had only heard of, other than using their spirit to scan the whole world unscrupulously or learn everything from the heart of the world, the best choice was to find a local to lead the way. If they really found the place, it would be a bit funny if they could not recognize it. At noon, the group of people went to the middle-aged man's place and found that there were already a few dozen people waiting there. Some of them were young people, and the rest were the guards that the young people had brought with them. The aura of the latter and the others were quite strong. How is it? Have you decided? The middle-aged man found a black stick out of nowhere and put it on his shoulder. He looked at young Master Shun and the others with a smile. A purse suddenly floated in front of him, making the middle-aged man stunned. He subconsciously reached out to catch it. It was heavy in his hand, making him stunned again. He opened the purse and took a look. Only then did he feel at ease and put it away. Just now, he thought that it was stuffed with a pile of stones. Then we will have to trouble you along the way. Young Master Shin clasped his hands. As for the money, well, it was a temporary thing. It was a small part of it. It would not affect the world in this space. Well said. The middle-aged man smiled and waved the black stick. He glanced at the four people and suddenly said, "You didn't bring any bodyguards or attendants. It's a long journey." Young Master Shin shook his head. "We don't need those." His eyes lingered on Jing Yuanji, who was hanging on Yun Nuoxing's body. He scratched his head. He was too lazy to care about things that he should not care about. He carried the stick and walked to the front of the others, saying, "Everyone is here, it's time to set off. Newcomers, you should also know my rules. I am only responsible for leading the way. You can deal with the situation on the way. Whether you live or die is up to fate. After all, this is not a trip." Everyone grinned. They already knew the rules. No one said anything else. They just turned back and continued to talk or pack their luggage. Not long after, the middle-aged man rode on the exotic beasts one by one. He stood at the very front and roared at everyone. Everyone got on their own mounts and looked like they were ready to set off. Only the four from Yun Nuoxing were. Oh, they adjusted their shoes. This unique scene made many people in the group turn their gazes over. The strange thing was, they thought they would be looked down upon for not even preparing a mount for such a long journey. In the end, the gazes from the people in the group were 5 parts admiration, 4 parts appreciation, and 1 part pity. "What the hell is that look?" Hui could not help but roll his eyes. Pity what? Pity that they did not even have a mount and had to follow behind with 2 legs? Do you know that I can't run as fast as those 4-legged beasts in your port? Although he didn't know what the hell that look was, he didn't have the time to delve into it. The middle-aged man called out in front, and the group of people rode their mounts and galloped on the spacious road. Dust billowed. Yun Nuoxing shrugged at Hui and the others, and casually took a step forward, following closely behind the group. Mr. Ghost went out again. The number of people this time seems to be less than before. Is no one going to the Northern Temple? Hey, this isn't the only place that's heading to the Northern Shrine. We're closer to the south, so only those within 1,000 miles will gather here. Those who are heading north will of course gather in the north. Maybe we'll all gather together then. How many times has Mr. Ghost been there? I think he has been going there every year. It's been more than 20 years. Sometimes he goes there twice a year, sometimes only once. He has been running around since he was a young man. According to him, he has personally seen the Northern Temple 11 times, and every time he succeeded, he would leave behind a portrait. Every time, the location of the temple in the portrait would be different, and the surrounding scenery would be different. After all, the legendary temple is very mysterious. Not far away from the relay station, Yun Nuoxing heard a voice coming from there. It came after they set off, which surprised him a little. From what young Master Shin said, he thought that the middle-aged man was exaggerating. For example, he said that he had been there many times but only once or twice. Now that he heard it, the success rate was close to 50%. It seemed more reasonable, but it did not matter. Even if Mr. Ghost did not lead the way correctly, they could find a way to find the Northern Temple when they reached a certain distance. They would just follow them for now. However, it seemed like they would be eating dust if they followed behind the team. He thought for a while and led them to the side of the team. Then, the people in the team saw the four of them walking at the same speed as the rest of the team without touching the ground. They were scared out of their wits. Along the way, perhaps because they had been walking on the road for 5 or 6 days, they did not enter any strange or dangerous places. They could enjoy the magnificent scenery along the way. Occasionally, they would pass by a city to replenish their supplies and then move on. Their starting point was closer to the south. The northern temple was very far away for them. The journey was very long. If they did not have the will, they would have left the team halfway. At first glance, the young people in the team looked like pampered young masters and young ladies from big families. We had been watching them for the past few days, waiting to see when they would not be able to hold on and leave the team when they passed by a city. Now it seemed that those young people were determined to win. Some of them even came with the will to die. Those people had the most guards and attendants. It seemed that they did not intend to embark on the return journey until they saw the northern divine temple. We are getting closer to the north. After passing by 4 more cities, we will not have any more supplies. If you feel that you can't go on, you still have a chance to change your mind. After all, after stepping out of the last city, we will begin to step into the wilderness. There are only dangerous beasts and monsters there. Mr. Wraith had said this to everyone when they were resting, but it was met with low chuckles. It wasn't a mocking chuckle, but a chuckle in response. It was as though they already knew what Mr. Wraith was going to say. Mr. Spectre, please lead the way. None of us here will say anything like return. We won't stop until we reach the destination, a young man said with a smile. Mr. Ghost also smiled. Then, I hope you are ready. Yun Nuoshing was more concerned about the word monster that he mentioned. As soon as his eyes turned, Hui knew what he was thinking about. He rushed out quickly, so fast that no one noticed. When the team finished resting and was ready to move on, he quietly came back and then gave him a thumbs up. It's just some low-level things with the ability to confuse the mind, and I don't know whether it's the spirit or the soul type of attack. It's a big threat to the people in this world, but for us, standing there and letting them hit us, they can't even think about deducting a bit of our rationality value. Young Master Shen was curious. What is rationality? Yun Nuoshing's face twitched. You can think of it as a mental defense line. Ahem. Anyway, it's a mental or soul-type enemy. It can easily affect one's mind during battle. Young Master Shen nodded to show that he understood. Are they really just some low-level toys? Yun Nuoshing asked Hui in his soul. He still remembered what kind of place this was. The thing that appeared in this place, is it a low-level one? Well, that's what it looks like from the information I got. Hui made a funny face. But who knows what the real situation is? Maybe something unexpected will happen. After all, buddy, your body is so tough. I'll hide. Yun Nuoshing saw that the guy was jumping like a monkey. He was so angry that he laughed. He had not done anything yet. I'll hide. Can't you talk nicely? Oh. Hui scratched his head. Well, that's the situation. As for the rest, we will be out in a few days. We will know by then. It took them half a month to go from the orderly civilized area to the wilderness. It was only when they left the city and went deep into the wilderness for 4 days that they officially stepped into the wilderness. Then, speaking of which, this journey was a little too peaceful. Yun Nuoshing could not help but say. Unknowingly, they were walking on a rugged mountain path. Beside them was a bottomless abyss. The steep mountain path was only wide enough for 2/3 of a person to walk straight. If they really wanted to walk, they would have to walk sideways and stick to the mountain wall. One wrong step and they would fall into the abyss. It should have been like this. Mr. Ghost and the rest of the party walked sideways against the mountain wall. They tilted their heads and looked at Yun Nuoshing's group, who were walking at the side of the party. They were speechless. The journey in the wilderness for more than half a month had shown them what it meant to do whatever one wanted. Based on the original situation, they should have experienced more than a dozen dangers. Jungle, Dead Sea, desert, and volcanoes. Even if they had some strength, they would easily get lost in these places. Even if they formed a group, they would lose contact with them. In the end, they would either become fertilizer for the forest, dung for the beasts, bones buried by the wind, or drown in the Dead Sea. That was what Mr. Ghost had experienced. What kind of situation had he not seen in his life? No, this was not the first time he had seen a situation like this where they lost 0 people in a month's time, especially in a situation like this. Yun Nuoshing's group had been walking at the side of the party. That's right, the mountain path in front of them could only be walked sideways against the mountain wall. They were walking on air above the abyss. The last time I brought people here was about 6 times ago. Back then, on this mountain path, everyone was tied up with ropes and holding iron nails in their hands to the mountain wall. They crawled over step by step. Look, there are still marks on the mountain, Mr. Ghost could not help but say. Everyone looked at the bowl-sized holes on the mountain wall. They were so deep that one could stick an arm through them. They could roughly imagine the situation of the iron nails, and could not help but nod. If one person fell down, everyone would hold on to the iron nails and wait for the ropes to stabilize before we rescue them. Even so, we would still lose some people, Mr. Ghost sighed. And then? We floated around at the side and asked curiously, where did the iron nails go? The iron nails were taken away. There are still some useful ones along the way. I have walked here 3 times. This is the 4th time. At least 10 people died each time. Mr. Hui, please don't walk around in front of us. You will scare us to death. Mr. Ghost rolled his eyes and looked at Hui. What are you afraid of? The ropes are in my hands. Hui shrugged nonchalantly. He even waved the rope in his hand. The other end of the rope was wrapped around everyone's waist. It's because we are in your hands that we are afraid. Everyone smiled bitterly. They definitely would not die. In the past half a month, they had witnessed the strength of this group of people. Even so, even if they did not die, they would still be scared. They were not at the level of Hui and the others. If they fell down, they would scream for a long time. It's okay. Hui could see that everyone was a little nervous. He waved his hand nonchalantly, causing everyone's heart to beat faster. He was waving a huge pile of ropes in his hand. At most, there will be an ah sound. There won't be a pa-ji. Hui smiled confidently and said to everyone. Everyone imagined that scene and suddenly felt like fainting. Chapter 1431. The steep mountain path continued forward along the row of holes in the mountain wall. The road was slightly inclined upward, and they could only see a clear arc from a dozen meters away. It looked like a spiral staircase that was constantly climbing up the mountain. The abyss on their left was covered by clouds, and their vision was a little blurry. However, they could still see Mr. Ghost walking at the front of the group. The few mysterious but very powerful people beside him were still walking in the air, and the fear in their hearts was minimized. When they saw the group moving ahead, they wiped the sweat off their faces and hurried to catch up. Yun Nuoshing looked at the mountain path that was sticking to the mountain wall. He looked around and walked out a little to take in the full view of the mountain. He then scanned the mountain from bottom to top. After a while, he confirmed that the mountain path was indeed climbing up, but it was not a spiral staircase. It was just a continuous path that slightly caved into the mountain. The entire mountain path was going forward and up, and it was climbing from the abyss to the ground. That's right, the steep mountain path was actually halfway up the abyss, but the starting point was a piece of flat land, so they could not recognize it. When they reached the top, they realized that they had walked to a higher terrain, and only by walking further away could they see the full picture. Speaking of which, along the way, the altitude of the place was fluctuating. He felt like he was standing on clouds at the higher places, and he felt like he was walking in a deep valley at the lower places. Oh no, he had even walked through the bottom of the Dead Sea. Why was he worrying about the altitude here? There's a staircase in front? Yun Nuoshing heard Mr. Ghost's sudden exclamation as soon as he flew back. He turned his gaze to the front and saw that there was indeed a grayish-white staircase. It was formed naturally by a pile of grayish-white gravel and many wider and longer stones. After the staircase, the path in front was much more spacious. When they saw the spacious path, they could not help but heave a sigh of relief. It seemed that after crossing the staircase, they would not be so scared anymore. "What's wrong with the staircase?" Hui asked as he came forward. Mr. Yu frowned. "This is the 4th time I've been here, but this is the first time I've seen this staircase. Furthermore, I don't think I've reached the age of senility." Mr. Yu mumbled. Just as he was about to give it a try, young Master Shun suddenly stepped forward and stopped him. "Wait a minute. Let me try." After that, young Master Shun floated to the front and stood in front of the grayish-white stairs. He lifted his foot and took a step forward. Then, he disappeared in front of them. Mr. Ghost and the others were so scared that their faces turned pale. After a while, young Master Shun floated up from below. He patted his arm and said, "It was fake." Yun Nuoshing turned the palm of his hand that was carrying Jing Yuanji in another direction and snapped his fingers lightly. The energy of the spirit and soul swept past, causing everyone's minds to tremble. A moment later, the grayish-white staircase and the spacious mountain road in front of them disappeared. The original position of the grayish-white staircase also became an ordinary mountain road without any big pits. It's an illusion that's half real and half fake. It doesn't directly affect people, but it affects the place. If you believe that it's real, you'll fall into the abyss when you step on it. Once you recognize it, you'll be able to see the original state of the path, Yun Nuoshing said. Hearing this, everyone quietly held their breath. It was the first time they had seen such a strange thing. But Mr. Yu was different. His face changed and he quickly said, "Hurry up and take out all the things that you prepared to defend your mind. We've entered the heavenly wilderness." Everyone shivered. They used one hand to support themselves against the mountain wall, and the other hand took out a lot of strange things from their pockets or other places. There were yellow papers, amulets, inexplicable rings, and inexplicable jade pendants. Yun Nuoshing could see that there was some energy attached to those things, a weak spiritual power and a type of energy in the soul. For a life of their level, as long as they did not encounter a special type of demon, they should be able to defend against it. What's the heavenly wilderness? Yun Nuoshing floated to Mr. Yu's side. He did not hear this when he asked about it earlier. It's a land of wandering spirits. Its range changes every year or even every moment. We were quite lucky the previous 3 times we came here, as the Tianhuang wilderness didn't affect this place. We had to climb up and walk for a while before we entered its range. However, it seems like we aren't that lucky this time. Its range has spread over here, Yu Wraith said calmly as he walked in front of them. Previously, I mentioned that we would encounter demons on this journey. This is the biggest danger on the last leg of the journey to the northern temple, the heavenly wilderness. There are countless demons in it. Yun Nuoshing's nose twitched. The range of his soul power that he spread out became more sensitive. After a while, he said to Hui in his soul, "It's a kind of energy domain, like the tide of chaos or the tide of darkness. It's a kind of domain formed by the energy of a large number of manifestations or other things that carry this kind of energy. However, the Tianhuang plane is much weaker. Oh, no wonder the range will change. It should be caused by some kind of energy carrier moving inside, right?" Hui reacted and nodded. The deeper we go, the stronger the energy response in the heavenly wilderness. Well, for the time being, I don't feel any signs of living things. Maybe they are hiding with the help of the field. But I can feel some areas where the energy is more concentrated. Yun Nuoshing said. After another hour, everyone finally climbed from the edge of the cliff to a flat land that was more than 2 feet wide. When they saw the boundless plains in front of them, they heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, we don't have to walk in that damned place anymore. If we continue to walk, I'm afraid we will be scared to death before we see anything. We loosened the ropes around everyone one by one. He walked to the side and looked at the plains with Yun Nuashing. It was a pale white plain. The ground seemed to be made of sand. It was a little loose. It did not have the rough touch of sand. A thin layer of fog floated over the plains. It was as if they had broken into the clouds of a mountain. The clouds were formed by the energy floating in the heavenly wilderness. What's next? Which way should we go? When Yun Nuashing asked Mr. Yu, she made a gesture to young Master Shen. Young Master Shen understood and quietly took out the golden energy crystal. He held it in his hand and blocked it with his other hand. Then, he activated the light. Mr. Yu stood at the edge of the cliff and thought about life for a moment. After about 5 minutes, he suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed forward. He walked along the edge of the cliff. Then, he suddenly turned his arm and pointed to the other side. He pointed straight to the depths of the heavenly wilderness. Everyone was stunned. The turning point was a little coincidentally. The place where young Master Shen's energy crystal pointed to was also the place where Mr. Ghost had suddenly turned and pointed, which piqued Yun Nuashing's interest. They had this energy crystal that could vaguely pinpoint their location, so how did he pinpoint it? I heard you say that the location of the temple changes. How do you know where the temple is every time? Hui was not afraid of anything. He asked directly. Oh, if there's something taboo, don't say it. I know it's an exclusive secret. Mr. Yu just smiled. It's not a secret. Everyone knows it, but not everyone can learn it. It's more like an inexplicable instinct of being chosen. Oh, just like what we did, right? Hui whispered in Yun Nuashing's soul. Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes at him. Then, she turned to look at Mr. Yu. What do you mean by being chosen? Mr. Yu shook his head. Like I said, the feeling of being chosen came suddenly. It was unintentional. But, just like the feeling of being chosen, I can't pinpoint the exact location of the Northern Temple. I have a feeling that there's a hidden meaning behind it. It's not for you to go sightseeing or something, Hui said, scratching his head. Those who have observed this matter said the same thing. Mr. Yu smiled. But after so many years of research, we haven't found anything. Out of curiosity, we kept coming to the Northern Temple to see if we could find something different. And the result? As you can see, this has become a dangerous tourist attraction. Yun Nuashing and Hui rolled their eyes together. They came here all year round. Other than seeing the different positions of the shrines, there was no other special situation. However, they did not give up. In the process of constantly going back and forth, it unknowingly became a tourist area that they would visit every year or even every once in a while. Well, this was the most embarrassing, legendary place they had ever seen. It was treated as a tourist attraction and people were walking around. If they were the demon, they would flip the table in anger. Oh, they subjectively thought that the Northern Temple had something to do with the demon. In fact, they did not even know if the demon lived in the Northern Temple or not. But this kind of internal and official thing, why did it feel so much like it's like in some worlds with faith the great temples and the gathering point of faith assign the position of the great priest? Feng, what do you think? Hui suddenly muttered. Ha! Yun Nuashing replied and tilted her head. I wouldn't have noticed it if you didn't mention it. Now that you mention it, there are some similarities. But the power of faith does not exist in this world, and we have not found any records about a god in the literature of this world. Hui shrugged. I'm just saying that the form is a little similar, but it doesn't mean that there is really any faith in this world. If there is, who do the people in this world believe in? That demon? I don't think that kind of thing can be the gathering point of faith. As he spoke, he fell into deep thought. Yun Nuashing was surprised that he actually used his brain to think seriously. Hui grinned and spread his hands. I can't think of it. Forget it. It's a waste of my brain. Yun Nuashing, If there is no such thing in this world. Yun Nuoshing pondered for a moment, and then called into his spiritual world. Qing Yu, based on your knowledge of the spiritual pivot continent, do you know of the existence of a collective life form in the spiritual pivot continent? Qing Yu, who had been waiting in his spiritual world for a long time, came back to her senses. She thought carefully and shook her head. No. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. Fine, he only guessed that this world might be related to the spiritual pivot continent, but he was not right. But, I don't know if that thing counts. Qing Yu pursed her lips and sorted out her thoughts for a moment. When I was looking through some records of the spiritual pivot continent, I found something related to the executors. It's related to the internal executors. It's related to the executors, that twisted race. Yun Nuoshing murmured softly. What's a twisted race? Qing Yu blinked. You don't have to pay attention to it. Tell me, I'll listen first before I make a decision. Qing Yu nodded. It's probably some information that has been passed around many times in the form of rumors. It's said that an internal executor said it himself, but the truth is still unknown. It's said that the internal executors once exiled something deeply related to themselves into the space of this world. At this very moment, it's still buried in some corner of this world. I've also thought that the land of exile might be a place to store that thing. Although there are many places of exile, it's not said if there's only one thing, or if it's placed in so many different places. Yun Nuoshing was still listening. Qing Yu had a pensive look after she finished speaking. After a while, she looked up and smiled at the space in front of her. She knew that he was watching. That's all. That's all. I don't know if I can help. After she said that, her expression suddenly changed. Feng Ling Jun. Haven't we been here for more than a month? Yes, but don't worry. The time of the graveyard of gods and demons is independent. When I came in, I compared the time rules of the two places. Although the flow of time in each place is normal and there's not a minute or a second of delay, there's a big difference between this independent space and the space outside. Now that we've returned to the outside world, maybe only 2 or 3 days have passed, so don't be nervous. You can treat it as the time in the graveyard of gods and demons flowing faster. Yun Nuoshing softly comforted the girl who was pale with fright. The above sentence sounded complicated, but in fact, it meant that time did not have much meaning relative to the void. Every world was in its own observable time. Although they were all in the same timeline, their schedules were different, and there were many living places within a world. Perhaps, even within a world with the same flow of time, there would be many different schedules due to many reasons. Projecting this situation on the level of rules would affect the space of the real world, and there would be a situation where your day has nothing to do with my time. Moreover, the greater the difference between the rules of the two places, the more serious this situation would be. The biggest gap would even appear, when something happened in a certain world and ended 1,000 years ago, to the distant world at the other end of the void, it was just a second ago, or millions of years ago, or not at all. Interestingly, when such a situation was investigated by someone who carried the breath of their own world and was observed, time would be pulled to the same level, and the 1 second in 1,000 years situation would become a thing of the past. It was a matter that could only be explored in history. As for how to explore this seemingly contradictory matter, he could make a pot of tea and talk to the girl from morning to night. But now was not a good time to talk, and more importantly, the girl was already dizzy from listening to him, and if he talked about something else, the girl might faint. So, in the end, he only used the words matters on the level of rules to let Qing Yu out of the sea of bitterness of making up lessons. After all, for people like them, what could not be learned from the level of rules? If there was, then they would just have to find the world core. The world core of 2 worlds. Hold on. However, the graveyard of gods and demons is just an independent space within the spirit pivot continent, and it has nothing to do with crossing the void. I'm just telling you about it to give you a general idea of the situation. The time in the graveyard of gods and demons is relatively independent to the spirit pivot continent because it's an independent space within a world. In other words, it's an environment with the same laws, and it might follow the same laws, or it might not follow the same laws at all. Unless the laws are modified, or the laws of time of this world are broken to create the laws of time of the spirit pivot continent, that state will not be changed. Anyway, as I said, if you really don't understand, just assume that the time in the graveyard of gods and demons flows faster. Yun Nuashing crossed his arms and kept nodding as he spoke. In summary, you don't have to worry about the issue of time. The little angel couldn't help but roll her eyes. This guy said a lot of unnecessary things. Couldn't he just tell her that the time in these two spaces wasn't affected? Why did he have to talk so much? It was making her dizzy. In terms of laws, anything related to time was basically the most troublesome thing in the entire void. If you don't understand it, you can just roughly say that time is faster or slower. In fact, as long as you understand it that way, you don't have to worry about it at all. But Qing Yu just had to meet a guy who liked to talk about such things. Qing Yu's head was dizzy, and she was sprawled on the table. Her hair was a mess, and she only looked up with a bitter smile when she heard Yun Nuashing's announcement. Lord Feng Ling, you know a lot of things, but I can't understand it all. There are some things. Well, you've been in my spiritual world for more than a month. With your intelligence, I think you'll be able to figure out some things. Ahem, I don't know anything. Qing Yu smiled, and Mei Mao revealed a hint of slyness in her eyes. Yun Nuashing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Wasn't that the same as revealing everything? Because it's not the time to know yet, so I don't know anything. When the time comes, everything will be known. Qing Yu crossed her arms and rested her chin on them. She smiled sweetly. Lord Feng Ling, don't worry. I won't make things difficult for you. Yun Nuashing expressed that he was very calm. I don't think it's a big deal. Well, when the time comes it'll be. In short, all the strange things in the void, and many situations end with the word observation. Okay, it's really over. I'm just saying one more thing. Yun Nuashing kept nagging and insisting on saying one more thing. Qing Yu's pretty face, which was full of smiles, suddenly collapsed. Yun Nuashing coughed dryly. I'll go out first. Let me know if you remember anything. Okay. Qing Yu nodded and watched as Yun Nuashing left. Then, she collapsed on the table. Her mind was full of thoughts. Although it was good to broaden her horizons, but her brain was really bloated. After resting for a while at the edge of the infinite wasteland, Mr. Spectre confirmed everyone's condition. He waved his hand and continued the journey. From now on, we'll really enter the infinite wasteland. Other than praying that no path will pass through the hinterland, you must also hold the weapons in your hands. Newbies, now is the time for real danger. Mr. Spectre could not help but look at Hui and Yun Nuashing as he said that. His cheeks twitched. He felt that his words were probably useless. However, everyone reacted quickly. They quickly got ready for battle. Their hands were on their weapons. Many of the guards stood on both sides of the road, vigilant of their surroundings. For the time being, it was still safe. After traveling for more than half a month, the mounts and most of the large supplies were gone. The only things left were the dry rations and water that they carried with them. Most of them were stored in their own storage containers. Traveling in this grayish-white wilderness, if there were no other things to disturb them, it would not be too difficult. Looking at the sandy ground, it was not particularly difficult to walk. Now that they were at the edge of the wilderness, the monsters would rarely wander to this place. As Yun Nuashing walked, she used her energy to stir the energy in the surrounding air. She tried to analyze the energy in the mist that shrouded the wilderness. It was the same energy in the graveyard of the gods and demons. It was very difficult to analyze it. She reckoned that it was the energy that emanated from the only individual. Now, she was looking forward to the appearance of the monsters. She wanted to see how the dark energy condensed the monsters and what kind of monsters they were. The rejection of life in this space is not strong, and the rules are normal. Only the order. Hui muttered softly, "This area is completely non-orderly, but why are the rules of order normal?" Probably the normal rules are also a manifestation of non-orderly. Just treat it as a new phenomenon. Anyway, it has no effect for the time being. Yun Nuoshing yawned and let out a long breath. The heavenly wilderness seems to be a domain formed by the convergence of that kind of energy. So it's not strange that it's non-orderly. The strange thing is the rules. At this time, young Master Shun and the woman in green who had been scouting ahead floated back. Everyone was startled. In fact, they went ahead and used the energy crystal to mark the location. When young Master Shin came back, he looked a little strange. He landed on the ground and said, "There's a ruin ahead." "Ruin? The ruin in the heavenly wilderness?" Mr. Yu was stunned. He frowned and said, "That's strange. If you walk into the heavenly wilderness from the direction of the cliff, you shouldn't see the ruin. Are there 4 tall buildings in the ruin? They look like towers." Young Master Shin nodded. Mr. Yu was even more perplexed. The heavenly wilderness is huge. It covers almost the entire northern region. If you want to get to the northern temple, you have to go through the wilderness. I have taken 13 paths, and each of them was from the edge of the wilderness or somewhere close to the hinterland of the heavenly wilderness. There are many ruins in the heavenly wilderness, and one of the paths did pass by a ruin. However, the path I took this time was not the one that would pass by the ruin. Even if there was a deviation, it would still take a long way to cross the heavenly wilderness before I could see the ruin. Then maybe the ruin is moving. Yun Nuoshing suddenly said, "The heavenly wilderness can change. It's hard to guarantee that the situation inside won't change. Although it's hard to understand the movement of the ruin, it seems that this land can't be measured with any common sense." Everyone shuddered when they heard that. That was true, but it was a little scary when they heard it. They continued to move forward. About half an hour later, they saw the ruins that young Master Shun had mentioned. Part of the ruins were buried in the grayish-white sandy ground. The ruins were scattered all over the place and looked very dilapidated. "Phew, it's really it." Mr. Yu exhaled. The way he stared into the distance was a little creepy. He took the lead and walked forward. "Let's keep up. Based on my experience, this ruin is actually a safe place. But we still have to be careful. After all, I've never seen it here. There might be something wrong." Chapter 1432. In the graveyard of gods and demons, there was only one energy body. He was referring to the energy drifting in this world. In fact, all of them originated from one individual. That energy had drifted in this world for an unknown period of time. Perhaps it had already existed since the creation of the world, or perhaps it had just appeared midway. If one wanted to know the specific impact of this energy, one would know just by looking at the heavenly wasteland. This place used to have life and towns, but after the energy quietly appeared here and took root, it left behind the ruins of countless towns on this wasteland. Most of the dilapidated buildings were eventually annihilated by the long river of time, but some of the sturdier buildings that even contained some energy remained in this wasteland. Most of the buildings that could be preserved in the heavenly wasteland were once protected by powerful energy, but they could not escape the fate of becoming ruins. The traces that remained here were just to tell the future generations about this hidden history. The location of the heavenly wasteland would change, but the hinterland would never change. It would always be the same place. Many people regarded that place as the center of the energy first appeared. Its influence spread in all directions, and finally weakened a little bit, creating this vast heavenly wasteland. The edge and the middle circle had also been set foot by people before. Those who went to the northern divine palace often set foot there. As for the hinterland, very few people would go there. Ordinary people basically did not know and would not understand what kind of scene it was. It was also imagined to be a strange place like hell, where no matter how powerful something entered, not even a speck of dust would be left behind. Compared to the central hinterland, there were obvious traces of human beings at the edge of the heavenly wasteland and the middle circle. Those ruins of towns were such existences. Yun Nuashing and the others were now at the edge of the heavenly wasteland. According to Mr. Ghost, the ruins of the town in front of them were not located in this place. It was a huge town that had existed before the decline of power. The 4 tall buildings that looked like the remains of towers were used to support the boundary and energy barrier to resist the attacks of monsters. At that time, the environment in the north was not so bad, and there was not such a large piece of primitive land between the north and south. The south was also not as lively as it was today. The history of the past was so vague that it was difficult to delve into it. What was known was that the energy directly descended on the once prosperous north, and the waves of energy and monsters instantly covered the vast plains, forging the heavenly wasteland of this moment. Some of the once bright and shining stars also became a rare bright beacon in this wasteland. The remnant energy in the remains of these buildings still had a certain degree of deterrence to the monsters, preventing them from coming close. Although these remains did not show the glory of the past and were already abandoned, they were the only traces of humans in the heavenly wasteland that were relatively complete. They could also provide a little protection for passers-by, but it was basically for those who disregarded life and death to head to the northern shrine. Now, the light of humans has shifted to the south, away from the monsters. The entire north has been abandoned, and it is also because of the heavenly wasteland. When Mr. Spectre stepped into the ruins, he did not forget to tell the group of people behind him about what happened in the past. Of course, he only knew a little more than ordinary people, and there were many things that he could not say. Although I don't know how the ruins came here, but it is very lucky to find the ruins of a town in the heavenly wasteland. We can have a good rest here. That is, it would be better if we appeared when we went deeper into the heavenly wasteland. It is not that useful now. In short, the group of tourists walked into the ruins of the city, but no one really relaxed. Mr. Spectre was leading the way, waving the black stick around. The others also looked around with vigilance, but Yun Nuashing and the others were not worried at all. They walked around calmly. As young Master Shin walked, he carved small pieces of runes and divine patterns on the walls of the dilapidated buildings. He looked at the divine patterns that he carved, and suddenly he was puzzled. He remembered that these divine patterns were incomplete. How did they suddenly become complete? While he was puzzled, he saw Yun Nuashing walking in front of him. Suddenly, he realized that Brother Yun had completed the divine patterns for him. But what happened? It did not seem to be anything important. He mentioned it that time, right? It seemed to be so. After that, he did not care about it anymore. He focused on leaving many protective measures in the ruins. After a while, the group walked to the center of the ruins. They could still find some damaged but relatively useful buildings. At least, they could use them to rest. There are traces of holy energy coming from the walls of some buildings. It's very weak. Even in its original state, it was very weak. With the erosion of time, the remaining energy has become even weaker. However, if it's used to deal with low-level monsters, it does have the effect of warding off evil. Yun Nuashing's palm brushed across the damaged wall. He did not leave a trace. He sensed a little and said, "The extent of the erosion of time was worse than he thought. Not a single building was kept intact more than 40%. From the remaining wreckage, he could see a faint glimpse of the glory of the past. As for the architectural style, he could not tell. It was too heavily affected by time. This kind of trace seemed to be left behind by the erosion of time for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps it was also affected by the energy. Many parts of the wreckage that were left behind were repeated parts. The parts that were not repeated were broken into pieces. Not a single fragment was particularly complete. There was no way to judge what the buildings of that period looked like from the ruins. It seems that there is nothing worth paying attention to, Yun Nuoshing said as he turned his head to look to the side. Then, he blinked and his face was filled with black lines. Hui, who was beside him, was nowhere to be seen. He probably left a while ago. It turned out that he was talking to the air for a long time just now. Fong, 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 I saw something over here. Wow. Why is your face so black? Hui came out from the side and was shocked when he saw Yun Nuoshing's black face. Yun Nuoshing coughed dryly and shook his head. He lifted his foot and walked towards him. Nothing. What did you see? Before Hui could speak, he heard a commotion from the people in front of him. Then, there were two screams. Then, he saw a few people suddenly running out. The two of them were stunned. They hurriedly rushed up to take a look. They saw a few people sitting on the ground with pale faces. They looked frightened. There were no wounds on their bodies. It seemed that they were just frightened. What happened? What happened? Hui went up and asked. Mr. Yu also shook his head blankly. They suddenly became like this. I just turned around and didn't see anything. Then, a few people rushed out. There is something in this ruin. I definitely didn't see wrongly just now. The young man pointed at the place where the few guards rushed out and screamed. Everyone who heard it felt their hair stand on end. They hurriedly huddled together. Yun Nuoshing and Hui looked at each other and rushed out together. They passed through a group of building wreckage and caught up with the few figures in an instant. They saw them standing in the same place blankly, scratching their heads in puzzlement. When they saw the two of them coming over, they held their weapons and cupped their hands respectfully. How is it? What did you see? Hui went over and asked. We didn't see clearly what it was. Oh, it was just a black shadow. The guard who held a big saber with a talisman stuck on it shook his head. We couldn't see it after chasing it here. The other party was very fast. We don't know if it was a demon from the Tianhuang wilderness. No, it shouldn't be. I didn't feel that kind of aura remaining. Yun Nuoshing sniffled. Then, her eyes flickered. She walked toward a place in the ruins that looked like an alley. Follow me. It's going this way. Hearing this, the few people hurriedly followed with their weapons. They looked at Yun Nuoshing and Hui and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. They ran for more than 10 meters, but the other party walked over with one step. After walking for nearly 100 meters, Yun Nuoshing and the others came to a very spacious place. In front of them was a 10-meter-wide road. There were dilapidated buildings on both sides of the road. They were covered by the grayish-white sandy soil, as if they were gradually sinking into the desert. This is probably the other side of the ruin. The guard with the big saber turned around and looked at the situation behind him vigilantly. He couldn't help but say, just the wreckage is so huge. How big was this town in the past? According to this model, if we trace back to the complete period, the total length should be about 200 miles, and the width may only be 120 or 30 miles. It was a relatively large city, Yun Nuoshing replied. In the end, she added in her heart, speaking to this world. Hiss, there isn't such a big city in this period. The guard couldn't help but gasp. He scanned the surroundings with his weapon. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of something from the corner of his eyes. His eyes widened, and he forced himself not to scream. He leaned close to Yun Nuoshing and whispered, Sir, the shadow is over there. Well, I feel it. But that's another shadow. The one you first discovered has its aura extending all the way to the front. Yun Nuoshing nodded and raised her chin toward the front. 2. The guards sucked in a breath of cold air. There's more than 2. I don't know what the situation is for the time being. The other party seems to have been frightened. They ran in a panic and couldn't hide their aura. Yun Nuoshing and Hui continued to walk forward. The guards followed behind them and ran all the way. The former glanced at them and said, Oh, by the way, the other party isn't a monster. Put away your weapons, lest you accidentally scare people. The guards were slightly shocked when they heard that. They put away their weapons and thought that there were other people in this place. When they thought about the situation just now, they couldn't help but smile bitterly. It's really scary. But in this ruin, we suddenly met a group of people. Their vision is not very clear. It's easy to see a shadow. We saw the other party as a blurry shadow, and the other party may see us as a group of monsters, another person couldn't help but say. Everyone smiled bitterly. In short, it was like two groups of frightened birds meeting each other. They were all in a mess. Ah, it's here. It's the place I wanted to bring you to, Hui said when he saw a familiar scene nearby. Oh? Then what did you find here just now? Yun Nuoxing glanced at him. It's right in front of us. It's the same as the road we're taking now. You'll see it from here. Hui pointed to the front. They kept walking forward. The spacious road soon came to an end, as if they had entered another city. They didn't walk far before they saw an empty land. There were many wreckages of low houses around. Some had only one wall, some had two walls, and one had only one pillar left. There was also a house that had lost its first floor, but the second floor was preserved. They could see a corner of the stairs covered by the sand. The second floor was less than half a meter above the sandy ground. There was a pile of wreckage in the center of the surrounded open space. Yun Nuoxing walked over. Hui pointed to the pile of wreckage and said, "This is it. It's the trace of a fire. It's quite fresh, but there's no wood or trees around here." The guard squatted down and fiddled with the pile of ashes with his hand. He grabbed a piece of debris the length of a finger and said, "This is a kind of flammable dry wood. We have a lot of it with us." As he spoke, he stroked a metal container hanging on his shoulder and took out a piece of brown wood as thick as an arm. "It's very useful in the wild, even when there's nothing around you. You just need to do this." He shouted softly and broke the piece of wood in half. He then held each half in his hand and smashed it gently. There was a burst of sparks between the two pieces of wood. After demonstrating, he quickly extinguished the fire and carefully put it away. "This way we can start a fire. It seems that the people who came here may be the same as us who went to the northern temple." "How convenient," Yun Nuoxing replied and looked ahead. About 16 meters away, behind a large wall, there was a group of weak figures. The guy who was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow was also there. "We found him. Let's go and take a look." The few of them nodded and walked inside together. Yun Nuoxing glanced at Hui and blinked hard, meaning, "There's a group of people inside. Didn't you see them when you first arrived?" Hui also blinked and replied, "I didn't notice so much. Besides, the life force of that group of people is too weak." After walking a few steps, we jumped inside exaggeratedly and landed heavily on the ground with a bang. Such a big commotion caused a wave of panic as expected. When the group of people who had already experienced something and became weak saw a group of black shadows rushing in, they were so scared that they shouted and screamed. They subconsciously picked up the blunt sabers in their hands, the rolled swords, and the bricks that were obviously made of materials from the ground. Then, they ran away, as if they were planning to escape and attack something. Yun Nuoxing and the others did not know whether to laugh or cry when they saw this. "Okay. Quiet down," Yun Nuoxing shouted softly. Her voice was mixed with spirit and soul power to calm everyone's tense minds. The chaotic scene froze at this moment. It was so quiet that it was as if nothing had happened. "Who are you people?" It only took 2 seconds for the panic to be collectively calmed down. Then, after a few more seconds, a man wearing his body was covered in bandages, especially on his feet. The bandages were very thick, and it was difficult for him to move. He used a black stick as a crutch to support himself forward. If you didn't walk forward, you wouldn't be able to see him clearly. Hui reacted. He waved his hand and a few balls of energy light floated out, illuminating the surrounding 10 meters. The sudden light made everyone quickly close their eyes. They were almost blinded. After a while, when their vision adjusted to the soft light, they looked in the direction of the sound. They found that it was a few living people, and not those monsters. They were all relieved. The guard with the big sword came forward and cupped his hands. "We are travelers from the southern capital. Like you, we are going to the northern temple." He looked at the temporary camp. It was built with the remains of a slightly larger building as the base. The surrounding cavities and walls had been repaired, which could at least block the wind. Due to the influence of the energy in the heavenly wasteland, the sun never came. The vision here was very dim. Ordinary people could only see things 5 meters away. After not seeing light for a long time, the pupils of these people were trembling all the time when they suddenly saw light. All of them were sallow and emaciated. They were delirious as if they had gone through a very difficult period. "What happened to you?" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. Yun Nuashing glanced at the remaining 10 people. They were in a terrible state. In this situation, there was only one thing for them to do: sit and wait for death. Apart from the guy who ran across half of the city, the others who could jump up like frightened birds had probably used up 2 days' worth of energy. Now that they were relaxed, they were even weaker. However, even in such a terrible situation, those people only showed some disappointment and regret in their eyes. They didn't despair or collapse. If it weren't for the fact that they didn't have any energy left, they would probably still be alive and running towards the Northern Divine Palace. It should be said that they were really prepared to embark on this journey. They were not even afraid of death. It was just a pity that there was no way to see the Northern Temple. This made him even more interested in the temple. He wanted to know where it got the magic to lure people to that place. "What else can we meet in such a terrible place?" The man with the black stick smiled bitterly. 15 days ago, we encountered a black storm in the heavenly wasteland. We lost some people. When we continued to move forward, we encountered a group of monsters. When we fled here, we found that out of the 100 people I brought, there were only these few left. If it wasn't for the ruins, none of us would have survived. Storm. I've never heard of any storm in the heavenly wasteland. The guard with the big sword scratched his head. He had done some research before he left. "I've been on this road for more than 10 years, and I've never seen such a storm in the heavenly wasteland." The man could not help but smile bitterly. "Maybe we're not lucky this year." Yun Nuashing checked around and walked to a guard. "Do you have enough rations left to feed 10 more people?" The guard muttered to himself for a moment. His gaze swept across the people who had almost no strength to move. He nodded and said, "Thanks to Sir's blessing, our team suffered very little losses. We saved a lot of food and water. Not to mention 10 more people. Even if we had 30 or 40 more people, it would be enough for us to make another round trip. I've encountered similar situations when I was wandering around before. Most of the time, the rations were abandoned or destroyed in the chaos. They were not used at all. This is the first time I've seen a situation like this in my life." Yun Nuashing nodded. She walked over and knocked on the heads of those people. "Do you still have the strength? If you still have the strength, stand up. Help is here. If you still want to see the Northern Temple, stand up quickly." As soon as they heard the words Northern Temple, a few people struggled for a moment. They stood up shakily by holding onto the wall. There was a weak smile on their thin and yellow faces. They raised their thumbs to the air and said, "Phew! I can still move, forget it. You'd better not move. You look like you're going to fall apart if you move." Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes and turned to Hui. "Go and pack up. My strength is not suitable for this situation." The young man who still had the strength to run across half of the city stood up. "I'll help too. I still have some strength." "Oh, there's no need for that. Just lie down." Hui shook his head and walked over. With a wave of his hand, a ball of golden energy fell on the group of exhausted people, wrapping them one by one in the energy ball and dragging them behind him. When he walked out of the door, he patted the guide who was holding the black stick and said, "Let's go, you can come in too." "Oh right. There's another guy who is half dead running outside. I don't know if he's so tired that he's vomiting blood." We nodded and remembered that there was another guy who had been running behind them. The guide looked at Hui in shock. He could not help but ask, "Who are you?" "We're all tourists. We're also going to the northern temple," Yun Nuashing said calmly. "But we're tourists from another world," the two of them said at the same time. Chapter 1433. When Yun Nuashing and the others brought the people back to the place just now, there was no one there. Rows of orderly footprints pointed in one direction, and there was also an aura mark left by young Master Shen in front of them, a huge arrow pointing forward. Everyone glanced at it, and after a moment of confusion, they all followed that direction. As the group went deeper into the ruins, the surrounding building debris became bigger and more fragmented. There was a 10-meter-tall pillar on the right side of the road, but there was nothing around it except grayish-white sandy ground. There was nothing, and they couldn't tell what it was. The pile of footprints went around the 10-meter-tall pillar and walked to the back. Yun Nuashing looked around and estimated that they should have crossed another city district. According to the direction, they should have walked into the northern city district. Behind the pillar, there was a large string of footprints left on the ground. They seemed to have wandered here for a while before continuing to walk forward. Yun Nuashing looked up in the direction of the footprints and was stunned. What's wrong?" Hui saw that he was stunned and also raised his head, and then he was also stunned. In the place where the footprints pointed, there was a huge building that looked very intact. When it was still intact, it was probably a very splendid and magnificent palace. The surrounding buildings, well, they were all broken into pieces so they couldn't see anything. But judging from the fact that the foundation was bigger than the buildings in other places, it was probably a more prosperous building. Maybe that building was the center of the ancient ruins. This place. Among the group of people who had just been rescued, the young man who ran across half of the city and scared them suddenly exclaimed, "Behind. There's something behind. I was scared when I saw those people just now, and I ran to the wrong place. And then I scared others by the way," Hui said without looking back. The young man scratched his head awkwardly. Yun Nuashing looked back at the group of people floating in the golden light ball, and noticed that they were getting better and better. They were almost fully recovered. He nodded secretly, and then looked at the young man. "The thing you said, what is it?" The young man pondered for a moment and shook his head. "It's just a cluster of wriggling shadows. I can't see what it is. There's no sunlight in the Empyrean wasteland, so I can't see it clearly." Another group of people. Hui waved his hand. "I'm more inclined to believe that it's another group of demons," Yun Nuashing said faintly. He pointed at a fan-shaped area in front of him and said, "This area is already close to the edge of the ancient ruins. Behind the palace ruins, we might have already left the area of the ruins." When he left the area protected by the ruins, he saw a group of squirming shadows. Could it be a group of people? Everyone carefully thought about the relationship between the two of them. Then, they shuddered violently. What Lin Fan said made sense. The young man's face immediately paled. So he had actually walked around the reincarnation road. Fortunately, he had restrained his curiosity and didn't go down to take a look. Otherwise, he would have really stepped into the reincarnation road. Soon after, he thought of something and couldn't help but tremble. Could it be the group that chased us? Chase. We turned around and glanced at him. The young man nodded. First, we encountered a storm. Then, we encountered a group of monsters. We were hunted down until we reached the ruins. But, I remember seeing them retreat. It's been more than 10 days, the guide shook his head. They might not have really left. Maybe they're just wandering around the ruins. Oh no. Your companions might be in danger. If they step out of the ruins. Why are you so calm? His expression changed greatly as he spoke. But when he saw Yun Nuoshing and the others, as well as the guards with the big sabers, he couldn't help but be stunned and confused. "Don't worry. They're just small demons. We're afraid of danger. We have 2 other companions to protect us." Hui waved his hand and didn't care much. "Ah, I see them." Everyone raised their heads. After walking through a city and crossing an alley, the line of sight in front of them suddenly became empty. Then, a splendid and dilapidated palace standing in the desert appeared in front of their eyes. They walked out from the side of the palace and could see black shadows squirming on the stairs that were about 5 to 6 meters high. When they saw those black shadows, they were shocked and couldn't help but be vigilant. "Don't worry. There are people. You can't see them. We can see them." Hui waved his hand to let everyone relax. Then, he jumped over and opened his mouth to swallow the mountains and rivers. Wah! Wah! Ghosts! A group of sneaky guys who were nesting at the entrance of the palace were suddenly so scared that their blood pressure soared. They panicked and their souls flew out of their bodies. Their eyeballs and tongues left their original positions and their faces were pale. Yun Nuoshing kicked him and pressed him to the ground. She rolled her eyes and said, "Are you still young?" When the frightened crowd heard another voice, they all stopped jumping and running. They turned around and saw the person who came with a ball of light. They all heaved a sigh of relief. The few young men couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Mr. Hui, please don't scare people in this godforsaken place. My heart is about to run into my stomach and hide." "Ahaha, it's okay." Hui patted the dust off his body and stood up. He glanced inside and said, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing, there are too many people inside, so I came out. Mr. Shun and Mr. Ghost are looking at the wall." The young man waved his hand. When he saw a group of people behind them, he was stunned. You brought people back." The guard with the big saber walked forward and said to his master. The few young men waved their hands casually. "Oh, I understand. It's no problem. There aren't many people on this road. It's only right that we help the victims. You guys are really unlucky. I've never heard of any strong wind blowing in the Tianhuang wilderness." Another young man sighed. The dozen people who were rescued couldn't help but smile bitterly. They had been muttering "unlucky" these days. It was really bad luck for them to encounter such a thing. We let them into the palace quietly. "Then you guys take care of them. We'll go ahead and take a look. Mr. Hui, Mr. Yun, I heard that there are monsters gathering there. Please be careful." The few young men nodded. They squatted down and quickly took things out of their containers. Clothes, blankets, swords, spears, talismans, energy charms, some protective equipment, dry food, water, and a doll. The young man was stunned. He quickly took the doll back. When he saw that no one had noticed, he smiled awkwardly and continued to take things out. "It's really monsters." Hui paused for a moment. He didn't notice that the young man suddenly laughed awkwardly. "Yes, I heard that there are a lot of them. They're blocking this place. Mr. Ghost and the others are discussing how to deal with them. The monsters wander over a large area. Their senses are stronger than ours. If we go out casually, we'll be easily seen. So, it's inevitable that we have to eliminate them." Yun Nuoshing and Hui walked into the palace. The space inside the palace was already empty. There was nothing inside. It was just an empty space. At the front of the wall, young Master Shun, Mr. Ghost, and a group of people were leaning against the wall, which was only half of the wall. They looked at the situation outside and whispered something. They heard footsteps behind them. When they turned around, they saw Yun Nuoshing and the others walking back. Young Master Shun raised his hand and waved. "Brother Yun, over here. How is it? What's the situation?" Yun Nuoshing moved closer. The others also made way for him to see the situation outside. He looked outside the wall as he spoke. "As you can see, it seems that we need to move a little." Young Master Shun shrugged. Yun Nuoshing looked into the distance. The palace was located on a higher ground. The place where they were standing was about 6 or 7 meters above the ground. Then, on the grayish-white sandy ground below, about 50 or 60 meters away, there was a large group of black shadows wriggling there. Of course, they could see the essence of the black shadows clearly. It was a large group of strange things in different shapes and sizes. They looked like something that came out of a failed smelting garbage dump. They were emitting a black aura. These were the monsters that people in this world mentioned. Looking at them, well, it was quite disgusting. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He frowned and muttered in his heart, "Why do I feel like I've seen these things before? Forget it. It's definitely not something important." After thinking for a while, he shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He focused on the monsters below. Half of the monsters gathered together were in the shape of beasts. Judging from the energy of the demonic shadow and the life of the beasts, most of them were strange beasts that had been possessed by the energy. Among the remaining half, there was a large pile of ribs. He meant that there was a large pile of human-shaped skeletons. They were probably the remains of many human beings who had died in the wilderness of Heaven Wasteland since ancient times. And they were not the kind that had rotten flesh hanging on their bodies. They were a whole row of skeletons. The skeletons were controlled by the black energy. Their hollow eyes were burning with a faint green flame. It looked quite interesting. Well, it looked quite interesting to them. But to the beings of this world, the mere existence of these things was not a good memory. After that, apart from these two types of monsters, the last type of monster was a mass of concentrated black energy. It did not have a specific appearance and was just a black mass. It could take any form. Although they were not conspicuous in the group, these unique energy bodies were like fireflies in the night sky to Yun Nuoshing. He could see all of them at a glance. They were also the most destructive and threatening of the monsters. What are you all doing here? Yun Nuoshing looked around. There were many monsters lurking around the ground. There were not many of them. He did not know if they were attracted by their own kind or by the people in the ruins. He rubbed his chin and suddenly blurted out, "The hungry beasts are staring at the meat in the can in a daze, thinking of a way to open it." Everyone was speechless. Did he mean that they were the meat in the can? It was just that the can was a little difficult to chew, but they did not want to give up. So the monsters were loitering around the can. There's still a long time before the energy of the ruins dissipates, but there's no point in waiting here. Those lifeless creatures don't know the meaning of fatigue and hunger. In the end, they'll only exhaust their meat here. They can't eat it, but the people here can't escape either. Yun Nuoshing tilted her head and looked at Mr. Yu. "Is there any other way? For example, we can retreat a little or take a detour." Yu Wraith shook his head without hesitation. "Thousands of demons have gathered here. The demons within 100 miles will sense the presence of their own kind and will subconsciously gather here. But in the end, they will not come all the way here. They will stop in the wilderness one by one. Judging from the current situation, there must be a lot of demons lurking in the wilderness. Their perception range is very wide. If one of them finds us, they will swarm us. If we take a detour, we will drag a bunch of little tails with us." Yun Nuoshing said concisely. These troubles were nothing to them. They could solve them easily. Even if they took a detour, they could leave the wilderness in a flash with their speed. But, yes, there was a phenomenon here that he did not know what to say. These people were heading to the northern temple and insisted on going there by themselves. And after knowing that with their strength and speed, they could go back and forth very quickly, they did not suspect anything. Instead, they persuaded them to go there step by step. This was also the reason why they had been walking for so many days. Other than not knowing the route, there was also this strange ritual problem. It felt like they were on a pilgrimage to see the most sacred thing in the world. So they had to go there by themselves. Even if they used carriages or mounts, it would not be a problem. After all, they were still walking on the ground, and they had already used up most of their energy. So it was impossible to fly across the everlasting wilderness with a group of people. So there was only one way to do it. Will there be any impact if we make a big commotion in the everlasting wilderness? For example, attracting all the monsters in the heavenly wasteland? Yun Nuashing asked. Mr. Yu Wraith shook his head. Monsters don't rely on sound or energy to sense things. Instead, they rely on aura, the aura of life. They can sense the aura of a living person from a dozen miles away. They can sense the aura of their own kind from 100 miles away. However, they are not sensitive to sound, light, or energy. That's why they don't have to be cautious when fighting in the past. They don't have to worry about attracting monsters from the other side of the infinite wasteland as long as they don't release too much of their aura of life. Oh, that's fine. Yun Nuashing nodded after confirming. She moved her right hand and half-squatted with Jing Yuanji in front of her. Then, she freed her left hand, broke a hole in the wall in front of her, and threw it to the side. Then, she stretched her arm out. What are you doing? Mr. Yu was stunned. To clear the path. Yun Nuashing said calmly. It is the fastest to go in a straight line between 2 points. The group nodded thoughtfully. A few seconds later, they recalled what he was doing. Suddenly, they widened their eyes in horror. What did he mean by clear the path? What did he mean by a straight line between 2 points? Get down. Hui shouted and waved his hand. He was the first to get down on the ground, followed by young Master Shun and the woman in green. Last but not least, Mr. Yu and the rest. Then, boom. The light was so bright that it was as if a star was blooming in front of them. Everyone screamed and covered their eyes. The surging energy brought about an earth-shattering tremor. The storm blew everyone's hair back. Suddenly, everyone shouted in all kinds of strange accents. Then, an even more luxurious sound wave exploded from the front. The magnificent energy flame tore the night sky into tens of millions of puzzle pieces. The grayish-white sandy ground was blasted into gravel by the energy and flew into the sky. The energy storm blew part of the outer buildings of the ruins hundreds of feet behind them. The entire heavenly wasteland experienced a violent earthquake. Even a sand dune in the distance was blown to the ground. When the energy explosion gradually subsided and the storm was only left with a gust of wind, everyone got up from the ground, trembling. There was still a very bright light in the heavenly wasteland. The light of the energy flame was still lingering in this dark area. In front of them was a big scorched pit. There were many places in the pit that were shining faintly in dark red. The ground seemed to have just experienced a big fire, as if it was hit by a meteorite. There were still some flames on the ground. The whole place was steaming white. Hui raised his head and looked at the ground. Suddenly, he gave a thumbs up. The heavenly wasteland hasn't split open yet. Good control. That's almost the same as a meteorite crashing down. Young Master Shun also popped up and said, Well, I still use too much strength. The energy aftershock is too strong. Yun Nuashing heard, but sighed and shook her head. She was not satisfied with her own attack. As for the people behind her, their jaws dropped. Although they knew that these guys in front of them were a little too powerful after a month of getting along, but this was a little too much. Even the most powerful guy in their knowledge could not make thousands of demons evaporate into thin air in a second. Those were the powerful demons that caused the fall of a powerful country in the north, and forced humans to move south. But they evaporated completely just like that. Thousands of demons could flatten a relatively weak area. Yun Nuashing carried Jing Yuanji on her back again. She stood up and raised her chin to the people. It's very empty in front of us. Let's pack up and go. Let's go, let's go. Hui let out a squeak and crashed through the wall in front of him. He slid down the side of the palace, which was not too steep, and sand and white dust flew all the way. Mr. Ghost was stunned for a few seconds. He quickly asked someone to go to the palace door. Oh, he did not have to call the few young people over. They were attracted by the commotion just now, and there were more than a dozen people behind them. He quickly said, "Let's go." Another guide carried the black stick on his shoulder in a daze. They only felt an unusual movement. What just happened? Anyway, let's talk about it on the way. Let's go before the demons gather. The group of people, along with a dozen more people, once again stepped into the heavenly wasteland wilderness. Behind them, the ruins gradually disappeared into the desert. They remembered that they hadn't found out how the ruins came here from the other end of the heavenly wasteland wilderness. However, they didn't have time to do that now. Yun Nuashing and the other three walked on both sides of the group. The group was formed into a flat oval by Mr. Ghost as much as possible, with the tapered end pointing straight ahead. They stood at the two ends of the flat oval. Once again, they stepped into the barren wilderness. The road was not easy to walk. Trekking for a long time in this dark place was tiring and dangerous. There were a few times when Mr. Ghost wanted to ask them to stop first, but after judging their physical strength and looking at Yun Nuashing and the others who were walking around, he suddenly dismissed the idea. Since they could still hold on, it was better to cross the heavenly wasteland in one go. Compared to resting, it was more dangerous to stop in this place. Although the level of energy in this world was weak, the physical strength of ordinary people was not weak, perhaps due to the existence of threats like the demons. These people who were well trained in long-distance travel had ways to make themselves last longer. Even if they had to stop to rest, they would only rest for about 10 minutes before continuing on. After 3 days, Yun Nuashing heard Mr. Ghost say that they were almost at the end of the heavenly wasteland. But the hinterland is in that direction, right? Yun Nuashing pointed to the side of the path. She could sense a strong black aura from there. That's right. The hinterland is not the center of the heavenly wasteland. It's closer to the north. The entire hinterland's radiation zone is a long oval running from northeast to southwest. We entered the heavenly wasteland from the side. In fact, we have also passed through a part of the central region of the heavenly wasteland, said Mr. Ghost. A young man suddenly knocked his hand. Oh, that's the part of the path from 2 nights ago, right? The part where many of us were sleepy but did not stop for a long time. Mr. Ghost nodded. The central region is much more dangerous than the periphery. The demons are denser and stronger. At first, I wanted to go around that area, but the central region of the heavenly wasteland is similar to the periphery. By the time I sensed that we had reached the central region, it was already too late to leave. We could only hurry through it. If everything goes well, we will be out of the heavenly wasteland in at most a day. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Even if they had many ways to recover, they were still exhausted after 3 days of traveling. Yun Nuashing raised her head slightly and looked around, searching for a certain feeling. Finally, she hesitated and looked towards the direction of the hinterland. She could not help but frown and suddenly smiled to herself. The latter part of the journey is coming to an end. Looks like I'll be letting myself down if I don't do something. Chapter 1434. On the last stretch of the journey across the heaven wasteland, the 2 guides walked in front of the team, one on the left and one on the right. Walking on this last stretch of the road, they were even more vigilant. They did not want to try to capsize the boat in the gutter. They might die if they tried. They turned their heads to look at Yun Nuashing and the others who were yawning, and suddenly felt that this boat would not capsize. They shook their heads to get rid of those thoughts. They remained vigilant. Although they felt that these people were more terrifying than those monsters, they could easily turn the heavenly wasteland upside down. Yun Nuashing and Hui walked in the middle of the team, one on the left and one on the right, escorting the team. Yun Nuashing suddenly stopped and looked to the side, looking at the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland. He let out a light breath. This was the 3rd time he felt a movement. Something must have happened in the hinterland. The origin energy was slightly trembling, and it was somewhat restless. There seemed to be something over there that was attracting them. Yun Nuashing walked to Mr. Yu and whispered, "How long until we leave the heavenly wasteland?" "There are still 6 hours left. After we cross that hill, we'll be able to leave this place." Mr. Yu pointed at the obvious sand dune that was slightly taller than the rest of the group. Yun Nuashing looked in the direction he pointed. The sand dune was less than 100 miles away from them. His soul power hidden in the void did not sense anything strange in this area. "It's pretty safe here. I'm going to the hinterland. You guys just keep going." Mr. Yu was shocked. His face turned pale when he heard what he said. "The hinterland is don't worry. The hinterland of the heavenly wasteland that you all are afraid of is just a special area created by some strange things. I've seen it. It's not dangerous. You have seen some of my strength." Yun Nuashing laughed before he could finish. Mr. Yu thought for a while and agreed. These people in front of him were stronger than anyone he knew or heard of. That place was probably nothing to them. So he nodded after thinking for a while. "We will wait for you for 4 hours after we leave the heavenly wasteland. Be careful." "Okay. I'll be back in a while. 10 hours should be enough." Yun Nuashing smiled and turned around. When he was about to rush out, a sinister laugh came from behind. "Feng, where are you sneaking off to this time?" His foot slipped and he almost fell to the ground. He turned his head with a black line on his face, and saw Huida running over from the other side of the team. Huida said in a bad mood, "What do you mean sneak out? I told them that I'm going out for a while." But now that he had attracted everyone's attention, he thought for a while and told young Master Shun. Then, he said to Hui, "I'm going to the hinterland. Are you coming?" "I'll go wherever you go." Hui smiled and shrugged. Yun Nuashing exerted force under his feet and blasted a hole in the ground. He turned into a shadow and disappeared from everyone's sight. Hui glanced at the direction and casually lifted his feet to follow. There was only one footprint left on the sandy ground under his feet. It was a scorched footprint branded on the ground. The movement of the 2 people leaving was a little big, causing the crowd to be in a mess. Mr. Yu waved his hand. "Don't worry about them. Let's keep going. There are about 100 miles left. Keep your eyes peeled. Don't screw up in the last part of the journey." Everyone looked at each other. They were not worried about the safety of the 2 guys. They were just curious about what they were doing in the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland. "What's in the hinterland that you care so much about?" Hui asked as he walked side by side with Yun Nuashing. "The origin energy is vibrating. I'm not sure about the specifics. Maybe there's something related to this world. Maybe it's related to the shadow. Maybe it's just a mass of energy." Hui pursed his lips and was about to follow when he saw Yun Nuashing was about to speed up. Suddenly, he stopped and reached out to stop Yun Nuashing, who was flying forward. "Feng, wait a minute. Look at the ground." "What?" Yun Nuashing said casually, then lowered his head to look at the sand below. There were many places on the grayish-white ground that were emitting black smoke. There seemed to be a spring underground that was spewing out spring water, and there were 60 to 70 spring eyes within 100 meters. As for the black smoke, it was the energy of the monsters that they had just seen. Such a large amount of spring water did not blur the vision of this place. The energy seemed to be quietly surging towards the entire heavenly wasteland like an energy core. When they stopped to look at the smoke fountains, the grayish-white sandy ground suddenly shook and then collapsed. A lot of things poked out from the springs. Something that they could not see clearly, a white bone arm and a strange limb. A moment later, the black smoke disappeared and was replaced by a large group of monsters that crawled out from the ground. They all took a step forward after crawling out of the springs. Then, another group of monsters crawled out from the springs, one after another. Each springs only stopped when 6 or 7 monsters came out. The exposed springs were automatically covered by the surrounding sandy ground. The ground was flat as if nothing had happened. Crawling out from the ground? Why do I think of some weird things? Hui tilted his head and scratched his head. The problem was that this thing did not look like rotten meat. The only thing that looked like a human was a skeleton. Yun Nuoshing thought that they had been discovered and was gathering energy to annihilate the group of ghosts below. The group of monsters that crawled out of the ground suddenly took out some weapons from nowhere, as if they were performing a magic trick. There were machetes, meteor hammers, axes, hammers that looked like siege hammers, and there was even one with a brick over there. The wolf-like creature that was wrapped in a layer of dark energy had a sword in its mouth. The two of them were stunned when they saw this wave of monsters taking out weapons from their crotch. The movement of gathering energy slowed down a little. It was also this time that they were stunned for a while. The group of monsters howled and ran towards the direction of the hinterland. There were about 500 monsters in this group. According to Mr. Spectre, this group of monsters could probably fight for a long time in some areas with weaker defenses. If there were 1,000 of them, they could directly annihilate the whole area. Although there were only 500 monsters here, this was not the only place where there were movement. The surrounding area was only about 100 miles in radius. There were more than a dozen places with the same movement. So, how would they account for the 5,000 or 6,000 monsters? I should have known better from Mr. Spectre. No, why is he studying this here? Yun Nuoshing shook his head and rushed out with a swish. Hui followed closely at the side. Looking at the ground that was passing by quickly, looking at the groups of monsters on the ground, he couldn't help but frown. Something must have happened in the hinterland. Something that could cause a riot in half of the infinite wasteland. What could it be? Yun Nuoshing said casually. In his senses, there was an intense surge of energy within a radius of 500 miles. The springs all over the ground had been extinguished. One by one, the demons crawled up from the ground and then formed groups to head towards the hinterland. As for the hinterland, the surge of dark energy was very strong. There was a little interference, so he could not see clearly what was going on over there. The sudden increase in the concentration of dark energy made them guess that they had entered the hinterland. Just like the feeling of crossing dimensions, they had not walked far into the hinterland when they felt a huge movement in front of them. They stopped to take a look and saw that there was a continuous burst of energy flames dozens of miles away. The light illuminated the dark sky. Below the ground, there was a group of monsters gathered. The number was estimated to be in the 5 or 6 digit. Moreover, these monsters were much stronger than the monsters in the central circle and the peripheral areas. The energy reaction of their bodies was not on the same level. For the monsters outside, as long as a group of slightly stronger people gathered together, they could kill 3 or 4 of them without any loss. Even if ordinary people carefully set up some powerful traps, they could kill one alone. However, the monsters in front of them were much more powerful than the low-level cannon fodders outside. They were all mid-level cannon fodders. Logically speaking, if the demon shadow did not appear, the monsters in this world would not be as powerful as they were. But he was curious about what these monsters of this level were doing here. Would Jing Yuanji faint from fright when she saw the situation in front of her? The little girl did not seem to have recovered from the killing in the spirit-gathering continent. The terrain in front of them suddenly dropped by more than 10 meters and sunk down like a basin. The sandy ground on the ground changed from grayish-white to a darker shade of dark gray. It seemed that there was more dark energy hidden in this land. Looking up and casually looking around, Yun Nuoshing suddenly felt a little shocked. In addition to the mid-level cannon fodders that were at most 4 meters tall, there were also some high-level cannon fodders, a group of huge monsters that were more than 200 feet tall. If they were skeletons, then they were not just skeletons. There were also fragments of armor hanging on their bodies, or even flesh that was not rotten flesh, as if they were directly peeled off a layer of skin. It was a little disgusting. If it were not for the fragments of armor hanging on their bodies, those disgusting things would be even more obvious. The energy explosion and the roaring sound came from the place in front of the few big monsters. In the center of the basin, there was a golden energy barrier that was thousands of feet long. The huge light should have illuminated the world, but it was suppressed by the dark energy of the monsters and could not illuminate very far. The light even seemed a little dim. Surrounded by tens of thousands of monsters, there were about 20 people behind the energy barrier. Their bodies were bursting with powerful energy reactions, powerful compared to this world. These 20 people, compared to the huge number of monsters that were in the 5 or 6 digits, were simply a small boat on the endless sea. The golden barrier blocked the violent storm outside, and once this layer of defense was lost, it would capsize instantly. And now, it seemed that the end was not far away. The golden barrier could not last forever in the face of the overwhelming number of monsters. Even if they were 100 times stronger, they would still be defeated. It was only a matter of time, unless they had some specific trump cards that could counter the overwhelming number of monsters. But if they did, they would not be forced to such a state. The energy barrier blocked the entire basin, and behind it was an endless plain. It was not really a basin, and there were no monsters blocking the way behind. Those monsters were not smart enough. They would only rush into the basin below and pile up. If they went around the side of the barrier, the battle would be over. Oh, if they looked carefully, there were indeed monsters that went around the side, but they were all killed by the 20 people one by one. There were not enough of them. Cannon fodders would always be cannon fodders, and the strength of that group of people was still pretty good. We rolled his eyes a few times, and the expression on his face told him that this guy was not thinking of anything good. Sure enough, he opened his mouth and said, What are you going to do? Kill them? Or kill them? You killed the guide. Yun Nuoshing was about to say that he did not think before speaking. But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed that even if they saved this group of people, it would not be of much help. After thinking for a while, he said, I think it would be fine to kill either side. Well, now is not the time to think about it. Those monsters are ugly, and we can't communicate with them. Let's just kill them. Yun Nuoshing turned his head and looked at Hui. Do you want to do it, or should I? Hui heard that and laughed evilly. He used his elbow to poke him in the back. You want to save people, right? Of course, the more flashy the better. If I do it, it won't be that shocking. You do it. Oh. Yun Nuoshing nodded indifferently. Because he was still carrying someone on his back, he did not make any gestures or make any movements. He sent out a thought, and the energy in his body trembled and gathered crazily. A cross-shaped starlight appeared in the sky. As early as 10 minutes ago, their energy should have been exhausted. They just used some small tricks to force themselves to stay alert and continue fighting in this silent place. But looking around, the ground was full of broken armor and broken weapons. Only the hilts of swords and sabers were left lying on the ground. The fine powder next to them was a part of them. They had long forgotten who sacrificed their lives to ignite the Great Wall of Hope. That 1,000-feet-long sacred wall was their last hope, but it was already on the verge of collapse. She looked at the cracks that were spreading on the wall little by little. It was as if the cracks were climbing up her heart, making her breathless. Her companions around her were still fighting with all their might, but they were also reaching their limits. They could not run away from this place. They could not kill many monsters even if they fought. It seemed that they could only launch a counterattack like a wild beast that was surrounded and hunted. Perhaps that was the best they could do. What hope of the human race? Nonsense. Did they look like people who could bear such a heavy title? They were only expected by countless people for no reason, and were forced to bear such a title. They might be strong, but it was impossible for them to reach such a level. They were just packaged by inexplicable words and public opinion, and then forced to the forefront of the storm. They were almost forced into a corner step by step, and could only continue to move forward like walking corpses. Now, the team that they brought with them was almost dead, and this group of people could not even protect themselves. What exactly happened? How did they come to this place? She could not remember clearly. Or rather, she did not want to remember. Bang! A tremor of energy pulled her back from her confusion. She quickly regained her consciousness. There was a huge black shadow in the corner of her vision that was destroyed by a huge amount of energy. She was still in a daze when she suddenly felt a huge force lifting her up and dragging her to the side. She saw that there were many traces of blood on her light white hair. It was the blood of her companions. Yao Guang, wake up. It's not time to give up yet. The other team might. The golden-haired man who was dragging her gritted his teeth and did not continue. She could not help but smile bitterly. Although there was a trace of hope in her heart, but to go deep into the heaven wasteland was not much different from seeking death. Even if the other team was stronger than them, it was only by a little. How long could they last? They might not even be able to protect themselves. Hiss! A screeching sound came from behind. Hearing this sound, Yao Guang casually grabbed a sword that was on the verge of collapsing on the ground. Without turning his head, he swung the sword and split a 10-meter-tall demon in half. A weak golden light began to spread from the wound, engulfing and destroying the demon. Even if she was a little dazed and exhausted, she would not be killed by these small fries. A young man in light armor wielded a sword that was twice the size of his thin and weak body. He slapped a huge demon into a pile of meat paste, which flew in the air and was destroyed by the golden energy. He took a deep breath and looked at the golden wall in front of him. He turned to Yao Guang and shouted, "Captain, I hope the Great Wall can't hold on any longer." Yao Guang gritted her teeth. Just as she was about to speak, another shadow pounced at her from behind. She subconsciously swung her sword again. However, the sword she had casually picked up earlier was now completely shattered. She only held the sword hilt in front of her eyes and swept it over. The golden-haired man who was dragging her just now formed a seal with both hands, as if he was holding two magic circles in his hands. Then, he punched out with both fists and blew a 5-meter-tall wolf-shaped demon into pieces. When the magic circle dissipated, his face turned pale and he fell heavily to the ground. Supporting the golden-haired man to stand up, Yao Guang quickly looked around. Many thoughts circled in her mind for a long time. Finally, she made up her mind. She raised the sword hilt and pointed to the flat ground behind her. Retreat! Retreat to the back! Continue to go deep into the heaven wasteland! The rest of the people roared in unison. Although it sounded very imposing, she wanted them to shut up and save some energy to run later. Yao Guang handed the golden-haired man to another person. She picked up a broken longsword and another longsword from the battlefield. Then, she crushed the sword guard and put the two swords together. She wrapped the sword body with a piece of cloth, leaving only a part of the sword tip intact. She looked at her partner who was fighting side by side and shouted, "Keep running and don't look back. I'll bring up the rear." She looked at the dozens of demons rushing from the side of the Great Wall of Hope. She took a deep breath and held the sword with both hands. Then, she was suddenly stunned. Her instinctive reaction of standing between life and death made her suddenly jump back a few meters. So sharp. Well done. A soft voice entered her mind. It was like the beautiful sound of a zither. In this cold and gloomy heaven wasteland, she felt a gentle feeling like a spring breeze caressing her face. Then, an extremely dazzling flash suddenly lit up the area in front of her. Boom! 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 The azure energy beam was tens of thousands of feet wide. It drowned the land in front of her. That transparent high-energy beam allowed her to see clearly that the demons that were enveloped by the beam were melting rapidly. Even the few tyrants could not hold on for more than 5 seconds. She was shocked by the scene in front of her. She did not notice that her body had landed on the ground. A violent tremor that felt like it was going to split the ground open made her unable to maintain her balance. She sat on the ground. The huge shockwave burned a black hole in the dark gray sand. Her ears were filled with the rumbling sound of energy. If not for the fact that she could still feel the storm blowing her hair and face askew, she might have thought that she was already dead, or that she was actually still in a dream. The sudden commotion made everyone stop. Then, everyone's expression was so dumbfounded that they started to doubt their lives. As for those magical creatures, oh, they had already turned into ashes. They no longer had the ability to be dumbfounded. Those in front, stop running. If you don't stop, you will fall into another encirclement. The sudden shout made everyone tremble violently. The person running at the front ran with both hands and feet on the ground, creating a large break mark before coming to a stop. Then, he rolled back, scared out of his wits. Oh my! The gods of the northern temple have descended? The golden-haired youth looked at the disaster in front of him, and could not help but gulp. Chapter 1435. Unfortunately, we are not the gods of the northern temple. Yun Nuoshing and Hui descended from the sky. The two of them responded, and then silently muttered in their hearts, "And if your god is that demonic shadow, there is an 80% chance that we will tear him apart." When the scene of the annihilation of the energy appeared in front of them, the expressions of Yao Guang and the rest were as stiff as weathered sculptures. A few of them were so scared that they fell to the ground. This scene had been deeply imprinted in their minds. No matter how much time passed, they could not forget this scene. Yun Nuoshing looked up ahead. A dark red ball of light floated in front of him. The ball of light turned into a beam of energy and rushed into the distance in an instant. A violent energy explosion bloomed thousands of meters behind them. The terrifying impact of the energy overturned the ground layer by layer, and the earth was almost overturned. In the energy explosion, a large pile of broken black shells suddenly flew out, a piece of bone, a piece of rotten meat, and a piece of mosaic. The shock wave from the energy explosion turned into a gust of wind that rushed over from afar. Everyone who had just turned around was almost blown away by the wind again. Yao Guang had just stood up and was almost blown away again. However, her powerful strength still allowed her to stand firmly. She looked at the energy ball that was blooming in the distance, and her heart was filled with shock. She had never felt such a powerful energy before. Even the strongest person she had ever met would not be able to create an energy explosion of such a scale. It was almost enough to destroy a high-leveled area with sufficient defense. Something almost crawled out. "It seems to be more powerful than those big guys just now," Hui said softly, holding his cheek. Yun Nuoshing nodded. At this moment, he had already walked to the person closest to him. "Don't be in a daze. Hurry up and pack up. It's not safe here." Although they did not know what was going on, what these people had experienced, and how they attracted so many monsters, these were not important because they might know, so they tried their best to save them. 5 minutes ago, they were still discussing with Hui about which side to kill. Yao Guang heard the voice that rang in her mind just now. She was also stunned. She looked back and was a little surprised that he was carrying someone on his back. However, the current situation was not suitable for her to think about anything messy. She quickly put away the long sword wrapped in cloth and shouted to everyone, "Pack up and restore your strength. We have to leave this place as soon as possible." After that, she turned her head to look at Yun Nuoshing. When she saw him nodding, she was relieved. She was worried that he would not give them time to pack up and she did not know what he was going to do. Yao Guang simply tidied up her tattered clothes and took off the broken armor from her body. She also bandaged the wounds of her companions. Only then did she walk up to Yun Nuoshing, who had not moved since he appeared. She bowed solemnly and said, "Thank you for your help. I'm sorry that I have to face my savior in such a manner. My companions have no strength left. She paused for a moment. Thinking about the name that was forced on her, it sounded very funny. She could not help but shake her head and change the way she said it. Well, we're just a team that's out for an adventure. I'm the leader of this team, Yao Guang. She paused as she spoke, as if she was hiding something. It wasn't hard to tell from the expression on the little girl's youthful and delicate face. Well, he didn't care about that. He just nodded casually. Hello, we are travelers who are passing by and heading to the northern shrine. We sensed some movement in the hinterland, so we came to check it out. Yao Guang was stunned. Travelers that are going to the northern shrine. She did not expect this answer at all. She thought that the person in front of her would be a hidden champion or a hidden power of some other region. She felt that those were more likely to be the answer. She did not expect that he was just a traveler. Could it be that the people that go to the northern shrine have become so strong? Shaking her head to get rid of some unrealistic thoughts, Yao Guang let out a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to speak, Yun Nuoxing spoke first. Since you're an expedition, you should know something about the hinterland, right? We're going to the center of the hinterland. If you know the location, can you lead the way? You're going to the abyss? Yao Guang's beautiful face immediately paled. Just the mention of that place caused his heart, which had just calmed down, to beat a few beats faster. When the others heard this cry of alarm, they also raised their heads in horror. The atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent and gloomy, as if he had mentioned some terrible place of death, a source of fear that lingered in everyone's hearts. Yao Guang's cheeks turned red. She looked at Yun Nuoxing in horror for a while before she calmed down. She tried to speak in a calm tone. What are you going to do there? There's something that we don't know. Some kind of feeling led us to the hinterland. But after we came in, that feeling disappeared. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and said. She then pondered for a moment and felt that it was difficult for her to explain the situation. She could only shake her head. I don't know. Anyway, we have to go there. Well, it's not easy to say anything now. Anyway, you guys should rest for a while. If you don't want to go, we'll go by ourselves. Yun Nuoxing shook her head and flicked her long hair. Yao Guang was silent for a while and did not respond. They really needed to rest for a while. They would talk about it again after they had recovered some strength. The impact of the energy flames that had just erupted disappeared bit by bit. The heavenly wasteland gradually darkened. The darkness and energy fog here were all brought about by the dark energy. The dark energy that had been scattered by the explosion began to gather again. They could still see the sun in the sky, but the sunlight could not illuminate the barren wilderness. Hopefully, there was a strong force of order left behind here after the Great Wall was shattered. It was enough to support a territory of order in this strange place in a short period of time. This would allow those exhausted fellows to have a good rest in this uncomfortable and inappropriate environment and speed up the recovery of their strength. They looked at the endless barren wilderness. Although they had relaxed, their expressions were still tense. It was not their first time visiting the heavenly wasteland. There was no real safe place here. Moreover, they were now in the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland. They were safe now only because all the monsters nearby had been wiped out. However, there were more monsters in the heavenly wasteland. The monsters in the hinterland were very powerful and roamed a very large area. This place was only temporarily safe. If they could not find a way out, they would be trapped in the hinterland sooner or later. The golden-haired young man checked everyone's condition one by one and took some things that were broken or occupied by crack. Yun Nuoxing looked a little like the little things that Mr. Spectre and his team members looted when they entered the heavenly wasteland to resist the energy corrosion of the wilderness. However, these people in front of him seemed to be of a higher level. Well, as a team that had gone so far into the hinterland, how could they not have prepared carefully? The golden-haired young man and the others looked at the things that had been extinguished and the energy reaction had disappeared. They could not help but sigh. Their emotions were as bad as they could be. Even if they searched through all the containers on their bodies, they could not find anything useful. Leader, all the spirit talismans are gone. With only half of them left, I don't think we can make it out of the hinterland. The golden-haired young man approached Yao Guang and said. Yao Guang could not help but frown. She gathered all the broken things on the battlefield in front of her and piled them up into a small mountain. If we make them now, without the materials, we can't make enough protective talismans with just these broken things. The golden-haired young man shook his head. They can only support us for a short distance. Without the protective talismans, we will instantly be lost in the heavenly wasteland. Yun Nuoxing did not understand the importance of the talismans, but he could see the hopelessness on everyone's faces. He looked around and walked towards Yao Guang. What's wrong? Yao Guang looked at him and shook her head. We may not be able to make it out. The energy of the hinterland has a very serious impact on the mind. Our talismans have been completely destroyed before we came and during the battle. There is no way to make new ones now. Even if we survive, we can't make it out of the hinterland without the talismans. After saying that, she suddenly thought of something and stared straight at Yun Nuoxing. The person in front of her was stronger than anyone she had ever seen. They did not seem to have any talismans on them, nor did they see any other protective equipment. How did he deal with the spiritual pollution in the heaven wasteland wilderness? Do you have any extra talismans? Yao Guang asked carefully. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. We don't need those things. The energy of the heavenly wasteland has no effect on us. This answer surprised Yao Guang and the golden-haired young man. Yao Guang hesitated for a moment and said, Then do you have a way to send us out? It's very simple. Yun Nuoxing nodded without thinking. He only needed to release a little bit of energy to form an energy field to protect this group of people. A touch of joy appeared on Yao Guang's face. His tone suddenly changed. But I have to go to the demonic abyss that you mentioned. I'm too lazy to go back and forth twice. The golden-haired young man's face was bitter. How could they possibly come back from that damned place? They still could not escape death. Without the talismans, they would die here. This person in front of them seemed to be able to protect them, but they had to go to the demonic abyss first. They would die either way. Okay, we'll take you there. Yao Guang nodded without thinking. She understood the situation immediately. She did not have to choose. Perhaps there was a glimmer of hope for them to survive if they followed him. Then you should go and rest first. After you've rested, we'll go. Yun Nuoxing raised his head halfway. Yao Guang and the golden-haired young man saw him and turned to look at the sky behind them. A golden light burst out from the end of their line of sight. It suddenly disappeared in mid-air and then reappeared beside them. Huey's figure emerged from the golden light. When he saw Yun Nuoxing looking at him, he walked forward and said, Feng, I saw a group of people over there. They're in a similar situation as these people. They're surrounded by monsters, but the situation is much safer than here. The number of monsters over there is only about 1/10 of the number of monsters here. Do you want to go and take a look? There's someone else? Yun Nuoxing replied and looked at Yao Guang and the rest. The latter was also slightly stunned. It could be another team. This time, there were a total of 2 teams that came to the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland. However, when we were halfway there, we encountered a black storm. When the storm passed, we found that the 2 teams were separated and lost in the heavenly wasteland. If there are no accidents, it is basically impossible to reunite here. We can only find out after we leave the heavenly wasteland. We came to the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland to investigate the monsters. Yao Guang did not finish her sentence. She saw Yun Nuoxing shake his head and said, You don't have to tell me why you're here. Well, I don't really care. Anyway, people who come here have their own reasons and situations, don't they? Yao Guang nodded. Hearing him say so, she stopped talking about their situation. She took out a map from the container hanging at her waist and said while spreading it out, The situation in the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland is constant. It's not like the central circle and the borderlands that change. It's the same as it was when it appeared here. Therefore, a map of the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland was drawn. The yellowed map had been around for quite some time. What was drawn on it was a big flat cake. Look at the complete circle. That circle and the lines were pieced together, and it looked like a flat cake. In the center of this flat cake there was a black dot. It was very small, as if a drop of ink had accidentally dripped on it. Yao Guang pointed at the black dot and said, "The location of the demon abyss is right in the middle of the hinterland. Now we're probably somewhere around here." She pointed at the bottom left corner of the map. Seeing this, Hui pointed at the top right corner of the map and said, "If that's the case, that team is here. They're closer to the demon abyss than we are. They may have been directly brought into the hinterland by the storm and lost their direction. We walked into the hinterland by ourselves and can clearly identify our position." Yao Guang pondered for a moment. Her gaze swept across their position, the team's position, and the demon abyss. Suddenly, she raised her head and looked at Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing did not wait for her to show any expression and knew what this little girl was thinking. "You want me to go and save them?" Yao Guang's face was a little awkward, and she couldn't help but lower her head. They were all saved by others, and they didn't have the right to give orders or instructions to a benefactor whom they had just met. It was just a little unrealistic. After all, they knew some of the people in that group, and they wanted to save them if they could. After all, the two people in front of her were a little too strong. With that kind of power, saving people was just convenient, as he said. Yun Nuoxing yawned. He did not think too much about it. He nodded and said, "Then let's go. It's just on the way. Anyway, we're going to the demon abyss. The more people there are, the better to understand the situation." That's a reason." Yao Guang thought for a moment and bowed solemnly. "Thank you. Anyway, I still need you to lead the way." Yun Nuoxing shook her head. "Let's go after you've rested." Yao Guang nodded and waved her hand to everyone. "Pack up and prepare your weapons. Those whose spirit talismans are completely broken, come over first. We're going to continue our journey to the demon abyss." She looked at the messy pile of things under her feet and casually put them into a container. These things might still be useful. After all, there was nothing left. It would be good if these broken things could be of some use. However, they were still a pile of trash. A young man walked up and smiled bitterly. "Leader, without the spirit talismans, we won't be able to last long if we leave this area. Why don't we?" Yao Guang waved her hand and interrupted him. She looked at Yun Nuoxing. The latter nodded. Energy flowed out from her body and turned into a barrier that enveloped everyone. She then lifted everyone up. "Let's go. We won't be away from the team for long. We only have 10 hours. Let's not waste any more time." Everyone who was ready was shocked when they saw themselves floating in the air. Yun Nuoxing did not give them any time to relax. After aiming in the right direction, she exerted force on her feet and leaped out of the area like a comet. She brought everyone with her into the sky, leaving behind a long trail of screams in the night sky. She brought a large group of people and landed in front of another group of people like a meteor crashing into the ground. The other group of people was scared half to death. The demons who were watching the scene were also stunned. The only difference was that they were scared silly by the sudden explosion of violent energy. Before they could react, they were washed clean by the impact of the energy. On the other hand, the demons were scared into a group of shrimps by the spectacular scene. Although the other team was not in as much danger, their situation was worse than Yao Guang's team. The number of people left in the team could be counted with 2 hands. The original leaders had both died, leaving behind 8 strong members and a temporary leader. The sky is so scary." Yao Guang crawled on the ground, trembling. Her pale white hair and face were blown to the back of her head by the wind. In the last 5 minutes, they had rushed into the sky at an exaggerated speed. Then, they fell like a meteor. She could only watch as the dark gray land crashed into her face. She had never seen such a scene before. Down to earth. Oh, the feeling of being alive. It's really not bad. The golden-haired youth was shivering on the ground. The group of people who had just recovered their spirits fell to the ground again. Yao Guang even felt that the atmosphere was a little heavier after meeting up with another team that was also scattered. There were about 300 of them when they came, but now there were less than 40 of them left. Every one of them was heavily injured, and their protective items were basically all used up. If they had not met those two people, they would have long been devoured by the magical creature army and become another set of bones in the infinite wilderness, or become a member of the magical creature army and attack them the next time there was an intruder. Since they only had 10 hours, and half an hour had passed since they had found the two teams, Yun Nuoxing slightly increased her speed. When Yao Guang and the others recovered a little, she carried them forward again. This time, they did not rush as violently as before. They floated in the sky and flew forward at a faster speed, so as not to disturb the demons hidden in the heavenly wasteland wilderness. After flying forward for half an hour, Yun Nuoxing and Hui gradually stopped in the sky and looked down at the ground. According to the route, if they were not wrong, they should have reached their destination by now. However, the surroundings were empty, dark gray sand, and a group of springs that spewed out black energy. Other than these, there was nothing on the ground. They did not see anything that could be called abyss or demon abyss. Logically speaking, we should have arrived. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at Yao Guang. Can't you recognize the way from the sky? Do you want to go down? Yao Guang heard her and shook his head. If there is no problem with the map, this should be the position. After saying that, she smiled bitterly. It's just that we have never been to the demon abyss. We have only heard of the legends of the demon abyss. We don't know if there will be any other situation there. Demon abyss? You want to go to the demon abyss? The leader of the other team was stunned and his face suddenly turned pale. After a moment, he shook his head. The demon abyss will not always be in the same place. Yao Guang was stunned. But didn't they say that the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland wilderness will never change? That's right, the hinterland will not have any great changes, but the demon abyss is an exception. The leader took out the map and spread it out. This map was recorded more than 1,000 years ago. The black dot on the map is indeed the demon abyss, but its position is just right in the middle of the map, which makes people mistakenly think that the demon abyss is in the center of the hinterland. He looked at the map and rolled it up. The demon abyss carries 90% of the energy of the heavenly wasteland wilderness. Its existence is very strange, and it will not stay in the same place for a long time. Its position will only move within the hinterland, and it will not go to the center circle or the edge of the heavenly wasteland wilderness. I once followed a small team into the hinterland of the heavenly wasteland with a force 10 times stronger than the one we brought this time. No demon could stop our footsteps, and then... The captain paused, a bitter smile on his face. Hui rolled his eyes and said, "Don't tell me that the demon abyss suddenly appeared in front of you?" The captain smiled bitterly and nodded. The demonic abyss appeared 10 miles in front of us. It was like a demonic well spewing out a black fountain. That energy instantly destroyed the great wall of hope that everyone had gathered together. After that, destruction came. After the demonic abyss appeared, the demons seemed to have gone mad. Every single one of them became stronger than any of the demons that we had faced before. They almost buried all of us alive. We lost half of our men to escape from the demon abyss, but at that time, all the demons in the heavenly wasteland wilderness went crazy and became extremely manic. It was as if our approach to the demon abyss had unintentionally triggered something, and made them very fierce. We killed all the way, and when we left the heavenly wasteland wilderness, less than 20% of our men were left. He could not help but sigh. Now that I think about it, it's still like a nightmare. Although this incident was clearly recorded, not many people know about it. Then it's going to be a little troublesome to find. Hui scratched his head helplessly and looked at Yun Nuoshing. Should we do something big? Yun Nuoshing thought for a while and shook her head. Let's walk around here first. After an hour, if we can't find it, we'll use some extreme measures. Yao Guang said, Extreme measures? Hui gestured. Like blowing up the entire heavenly wasteland wilderness or something. Everyone's face turned pale. Chapter 1436. If someone else had told her that they would do something to the heavenly wasteland, she might have laughed politely and not taken it seriously. When the heavenly wasteland first appeared, it destroyed the most powerful force of the human race. It had been standing here for many years. How could it be destroyed so easily? It was the dream of many generations. However, when this mysterious and powerful girl said such a thing, she did not have the slightest thought of refuting or sneering. It was as if she said that it would happen, and it was already an established fact. This was Yao Guang's feeling, although she felt that something was not right after being saved by Yun Nuoshing and seeing his power. After hearing what he said, after experiencing the initial shock, they did not have any other reaction. They lowered their heads and their eyes flickered, as if they were still somewhat expectant. If this mysterious expert could really destroy the heaven wasteland wilderness, then, well, it seemed that there would not be any changes in the short term. That black energy would still appear in front of the world from time to show its existence. The heaven wasteland wilderness was only its most terrifying nest. In short, the conversation between Yun Nuoshing and Hui evoked some small thoughts in everyone's hearts. They were all unrealistic fantasies that had existed before. Those thoughts stubbornly stood in their minds and consciousness and refused to disperse. So much so that they had forgotten that they were flying in the sky that terrified them. Their eyes constantly swept across the dark gray land, hoping to see that terrifying place. However, there were some contradictions that they did not want to find it. After all, the terrifying name of the demonic abyss had long been branded in their thoughts. Right now, they could not wait to find it. No matter how they thought about it, it was terrifying. The everlasting wilderness was a complicated and changeable place. Generally speaking, when people talked about its changes, the first thing that came to mind was the constant changes in the periphery and the middle circle. People who knew about the hinterland had an eternal perception of this place. In fact, even this static place would change. Ordinary people could not see things clearly from the perspective of energy, but Yun Nuoshing and the others could see that the large pile of black energy colors in their vision were constantly changing, as if they were changing according to some inexplicable rules. However, even if there was an obvious enough change in the energy level, it would not have any effect on the space in the real world. This was something that Yun Nuoshing and Hui did not understand. They could only speculate that there might be some changes in the mist on the wilderness that they could not recognize. It was a kingdom of monsters that suddenly appeared in this place. In the long history of fighting monsters and resisting the dark energy, the human life in this world had naturally mastered many methods to observe and record these two kinds of existences, and had achieved great results. The protective equipment, spiritual talismans, and the Great Wall of Hope that Yao Guang and the others used were among the more important strategic measures that effectively weakened the influence of the dark energy on them. They even had a slight resistance to this energy. However, this little resistance was not very useful in the hinterland of the everlasting wilderness. They still had to bring a good set of protective equipment before setting foot in this place. Oh, the Great Wall of Hope. So that's what it looks like. I understand now. Yao Guang was pulled to Yun Nuoshing's side to let her display the Great Wall of Hope. He stared at the Great Wall of Hope that was only gathering energy and had not been displayed. In less than 10 seconds, he nodded. Yes, I know how to use it. You know how to use it? Yao Guang's face was a mess. As mentioned above, the Great Wall of Hope was a strategic measure that not everyone was qualified to come into contact with. They were only able to come into contact with it because of their special status. Even until now, they were not very familiar with how to use it. But in the end, after he looked at it for a few seconds, she knew how to use it? Yun Nuoxing nodded casually, not treating it as a big deal. In order to verify it for her, he even stopped. Then, the dark red energy in his hand began to gather. With a snap of his right hand, the dark red energy spread out in all directions in the form of a net with him as the center. Then, following some specific and special weaving method, the dark red energy gathered into runes filled with energy in midair. Finally, it turned into something like a magic array and disappeared into the void, leaving only a dark red energy crystal barrier that spanned tens of thousands of feet in front of them. Everyone was so shocked that their jaws dropped. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at Yao Guang. "I've modified it myself. Do you think it looks like your Great Wall of Hope? You've even modified it." Yao Guang looked at the barrier in a daze and nodded. Indeed, it had the same feeling and the same way of operating the energy. Moreover, it was stronger than the strongest Great Wall of Hope that they knew of. However, the amount of energy released was not that much. It was only the consumption of a single Great Wall of Hope. "Who are you?" Yao Guang opened her mouth a few times, but she could not say it out loud. Now, she was really curious about the identity of the person in front of her. In her impression, there should not be such a strong person in this world. Otherwise, why would the humans be defeated in the battle against the monsters and the dark energy in the past and recent years? Yun Nuoxing understood a little from her complicated gaze. He only laughed and did not say anything. The topic of outside the world was not something that could be understood by one with a good enough brain. It was a framework, a restriction, and a layer of rules. If she had not imagined, understood, and had no knowledge of these 4 words, then she would not have been able to guess at this level no matter how hard she thought. However, now was not the time to talk about this. Floating around in the wilderness of Tianhuang was a very challenging thing to do. In the past, she could only walk on the ground and could not see the whole picture. Now that she was floating in midair and looking down, hey! A large group of monsters. Although those demons were hidden under the dark gray sandy soil and would not show themselves normally, once they entered the range of their senses, they would come out in groups. In the hinterland there were about 15 demons in one spring, and as they floated along the way, they saw thousands of black springs. The black aura that gushed out was really so thick that it almost choked them to death. Feng, the energy reaction in this place is very strong. We suddenly stopped at a place and pointed at the surrounding ground. The thick black energy was almost condensed into a substance, and it did not float out. Below here, Yao Guang stared at the ground below. Her black eyes suddenly flashed and sweat appeared on her forehead. There are several tyrant-class monsters below. Tyrant class. Yun Nuoxing and Yao Guang spoke at the same time. Yao Guang was already used to the fact that the two of them knew nothing, so he didn't probe further. He nodded and explained, "It's those gigantic creatures that you've defeated. They're usually accompanied by a small team or a small army. They're commander-class monsters, and they're exceptionally powerful. Every time they appear, it's a disaster. Our team was quickly defeated because we encountered a few tyrant-class monsters." Yao Guang could not help but smile bitterly as he thought of that crazy scene. Yun Nuoxing looked at the ground and suddenly shook her head. "There are 1,000 tyrant-class monsters below. 1,000! Everyone was so scared that they rolled their eyes and almost fainted. 100 of those monsters could directly bury the stable country in the south alive. The hinterland of Tianhuang. It is not something that can be casually explored." Yao Guang's face was pale. They did not dare to imagine what it would feel like to see 1,000 tyrant-class monsters crawling up from the ground. "It's okay. Other than the fact that the energy here has turned into a mist that is a little annoying, there is nothing else. 1,000 tyrant-class monsters? That's it. Yun Nuoxing still shook her head indifferently. She was more concerned about the demon abyss. They had been in the hinterland of Tianhuang for an hour, but they still did not find anything. Everyone was speechless. Is there nothing special around the demon abyss? Yun Nuoxing could not help but ask. The leader of the other team shook his head. No one has ever studied the demonic abyss alone, and no one dares to study it. Our understanding of the demonic abyss is limited to when it appeared on the map 1,000 years ago, and when our team encountered it. Then did you see any other strange phenomena in the first 10 minutes before the demon abyss descended? It is very difficult to observe those situations in the Tianhuang wilderness, so we are not sure. Yun Nuoxing fell into deep thought. Just as he was thinking about whether he should kill the 1,000 tyrants below with one slap to divert his attention, Yao Guang suddenly thought of something. I seem to have remembered something. If we count these 2 times, there should be 4 instances in history of direct sightings of the abyss. Let's hear it. Yun Nuoxing was a little interested and was not in a hurry to fly ahead. Yao Guang nodded. I saw it in the Great Library. More than 100 years after the Tianhuang wilderness descended, the strongest team of humans at that time went deep into the Tianhuang wilderness. They seemed to have seen the demon abyss there, but it did not descend directly in front of them. There was a strange phenomenon in the sky. Dark clouds and storms gathered, as if a deep-sea whirlpool had opened. Everything was silent, and the monsters did not appear. Yes, that is what the saying said. Before the demon abyss descended, or the situation around the demon abyss. Yun Nuoxing pondered for a moment. Just from these few sentences, it was very easy to judge, but there doesn't seem to be anyone in the entire heaven wasteland that fits this situation. Yao Guang was stunned. Yun Nuoxing looked around. His soul power had merged into the void and had scanned the Tianhuang wilderness without restraint. Although there was still a lot of noise and nothing could be seen clearly, he had used the power of divinity and divine right this time. The influence of the black energy was much smaller, and he could roughly confirm that there was no such phenomenon. The monsters did not appear. This seems to be different from what you have encountered. Yun Nuoxing turned to look at the other team leader. He frowned when he heard Yao Guang's narration. Now, he could not help but smile bitterly when he met Yao Guang's gaze. I don't know. The situation that we saw at that time was just like what I said. The monsters were very violent, and the will that filled the world seemed to want to tear us all apart. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Maybe the demon abyss is showing 2 different situations. Yun Nuoxing tilted his head and said, regardless, we have to find that place first. If we can't find it, we can talk about it here. What are you doing? As he spoke, he was stunned. We had been wandering around restlessly since the beginning, staring at the dark gray ground below non-stop, as if he had found something interesting. There were only 1,000 tyrants below. Could it be that he wanted to wipe them all out? Phone, I think I saw something over here. Hui waved his hand and greeted Yun Nuoxing. Come over and take a look. Yun Nuoxing was suspicious. He brought his team down a little and came to Hui's side. They stared at the place where the black clouds were spewing out. What's the situation? Hui looked at them and then looked down. There was a question mark in his eyes. Then, he laughed dryly and scratched his head. Looks like it's not like that. Wait for me, just wait here. Yun Nuoxing, question mark. Hui's perspective and perception were a little different from his in some minor details. He did not know how the 2 priesthoods in the realm of the gods made such a strange distinction. Anyway, Hui seemed to have seen something that he could not easily perceive with the perspective and perception of a guardian. Hui said as he descended into the dark place below. When he landed at the edge, everyone exclaimed, They now knew that there were 1,000 tyrant-class demons hiding below. If Yun Nuoshing had not brought them here, they would have turned around and run. The power of the demonic abyss was only heard of, and it was just a faint imprint in their minds. However, they had personally tasted the power of the tyrant-class demons. They knew very well how strong they were and how difficult it was to deal with them. Now that there were 1,000 of them here, they just wanted to run away immediately. Hui used some strength to step on the ground a few times. Yun Nuoshing saw that the sand dunes in the distance clearly trembled a few times, and gravel rolled down. From this point it could be seen that the heavenly wasteland was like an earthquake because of his feet. A rumbling sound came from afar after a few seconds of delay. Everyone was stunned when they heard it, and their expressions began to become numb. They were more or less used to it. No. Come out. Hui muttered doubtfully as he stomped. When a crack appeared in the infinite wasteland, Yun Nuoshing stopped him. If you continue to stomp on the ground, this place will collapse. Well, then I'll change my method. Hui scratched his head. He stretched out one hand, and golden energy madly gathered. Go. Yun Nuoshing was shocked. Don't you? Boom! The dazzling golden energy storm blew away the black energy mist within a radius of 100 miles. This time, the entire heavenly wasteland was truly shaken. In the distance, one could see several rifts that were several tens of feet wide forming a clear dividing line with their neighbors. Furthermore, the dividing line was getting bigger and bigger. The dark gray sand kept falling into the rifts, and the demons hiding under the ground were falling into the abyss. Everyone even saw a few tyrant demons that were holding maces that were hundreds of feet long struggling to fall into the abyss. Come out! Come out! Come out! If you don't come out, I'll blow up your house. I'm blowing it up right now. Are you coming out or not? Hui threw out golden energy balls in all directions like convulsions. Every energy ball that landed on the ground would explode with a loud bang. A huge white energy ball surged up from the ground, constantly devouring the energy of the heaven wasteland wilderness. The rumbling sound was also constantly resounding like convulsions, spreading to the sky. Many demons cautiously poked their heads out from the ground in the distance. They trembled as they looked at the countless suns rising from the ground. Their faces were blank and confused. They were actually blown out of their minds by the inexplicable commotion. They had been domineering in the infinite wasteland for so many years, but they had never seen such a scene. The demons, who never knew what fear was, were actually forced out of their desire to live by Hui's sacred energy. They were pushing and shoving each other in the direction of the hinterland. Yao Guang and the others naturally saw this scene from the sky. They were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell out. It had always been demons chasing people. Now, they could see demons being chased by a person. They had lived for a long time and had never seen anything like this before. Stop fooling around. The infinite wasteland is going to collapse. Yun Nuoshing hurriedly shouted at the demons below, who suddenly went crazy. Everyone thought for a while and felt that it was not a bad thing to collapse like this. If the infinite wasteland collapsed, the demons that humans faced would be reduced by at least 70%. There was no need to stop it. If you collapse it, what am I going to blow up? Yun Nuoshing cried out pitifully. Everyone! Suddenly, they felt that the infinite wasteland's ferocious reputation had dropped by more than one level. However, anyone who saw this legendary ferocious land being indiscriminately bombed would probably feel the same as them. Hui wantonly poured energy in all directions, but he did not throw any energy at the land where the 1,000 tyrants were hiding. Everyone could see that with him, as the center, golden energy balls were falling in all directions like raindrop. Every raindrop that fell on the ground would cause a loud boom that shook the universe. Their ears were itching from hearing it. Yun Nuoshing's hands were itching as she watched from the sky. However, since she was carrying someone on her back, it was inconvenient for her to make a move. She could only casually throw a few energy balls down, causing a dark red energy storm that spanned hundreds of thousands of feet on the ground. The two destructive maniacs were doing whatever they wanted here. Boom! Finally, a destructive roar that shook space and time suddenly sounded, suppressing the many sounds that resounded in the infinite wasteland. The destructive energy balls were suppressed and no longer expanded. However, they still stood firmly on the ground. From afar, they looked like steamed buns. A black energy beam rose up in front of them and went straight to the sky. The black energy surged and rushed in all directions. This time, the fountain could not be compared to the small fountains on the ground. The one in front of them was really a big fountain. The black energy that was so dense that it could choke people to death rushed into the sky and rolled up a huge energy vortex that spanned hundreds of thousands of feet in the sky. The sky that was just illuminated by the energy flames, as if it was daytime, became dim at a speed visible to the naked eye. Hui snickered when he saw such a big movement. He jumped into the sky and patted Yun Nuoxing's shoulder. "It's a success! The demon abyss! The demon abyss has come out." When the team leader saw the energy beam that suddenly exploded in front of him, his pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. He trembled nonstop. The scenes that he recalled surged into his mind. An unknown fear dominated his body. He turned around and wanted to run away. This was the first time Yao Guang had seen such a scene. Shock and a faint fear surged in her heart. However, perhaps because the two people in front of her were standing here, she was more curious. She could not help but ask, "How do you know how the demon abyss was lured out?" "Lured out?" Hui shook his head. "I just blew it up for fun." Yao Guang. According to historical records, this should be the 5th time the demon abyss was born. It might be the most sullen birth, because it was awakened by 2 lunatics. Chapter 1437. Monstrous black energy rushed into the sky, and the black light illuminated the entire heavenly wasteland. The thin fog was covered by an even thicker energy cloud, and the sky was darker than the heavenly wasteland before. It was like a moonless night, without lights or candles. Walking in the wilderness, one could not even see their fingers in front of them. It was so dark that they could not even feel it. The black energy light shone on everyone's faces, reflecting many dull expressions. Yun Nuoxing turned back to look at Yao Guang and the others. He waved his hand and pulled them back a little, so that they would not be fine if they were too close, but the people they brought along would be in trouble. He looked at the scene of the demon abyss erupting, and suddenly thought of the Moon World Lake. Both places gave him the same feeling, as if something sealed in a demonic well had suddenly opened, and the energy that could devour all life was spewing out, spreading to the entire world. He also felt that this unbelievably dense black energy seemed to be spreading into the distance. After thinking for a while, he pointed his finger, and a transparent energy barrier descended from the sky, covering the edge of the hinterland, completely isolating this space. Just as he sealed this space, the huge black energy vortex in the sky suddenly collapsed, and suddenly burst open, turning into a torrential rain that fell on the ground. Then, more black energy fog rose from the ground, and monsters that they did not sense before tore open the ground and crawled out, roaring at the people in the sky in a completely crazy manner. The energy light pillar that erupted from the demon abyss also suddenly dissipated, turning into a huge spring that spewed out black energy fog that was so dense that it could not be dispersed, gradually filling up this sealed space. The energy that surges out from the demon abyss and the energy that fills the heavenly wasteland are not at the same level at all, Hui said to Yuan Nuoxing. Hui said to Yun Nuoxing, "This is the difference of an entire primordial realm. There must be something below related to that demonic shadow." Yun Nuoxing looked at the large group of monsters that were howling crazily below, and at the same time, saw a few hills rising from the ground in the distance. Several huge monsters with huge weapons stood up, and just their line of sight was at the same level as the place where they were floating. The sunken eyes of the skeletons were no longer burning with green flames, but scarlet red with a sense of madness. Even the huge skeletons had turned black. Even the new monsters that crawled out were of higher quality. It was simply mid-level cannon fodder had turned into high-level cannon fodder. It was a disaster for all life in this world, but they still had the power to fight. If they used all their strength, they should still be able to survive this disaster. Yao Guang and the rest turned pale at the sight of the monsters that filled the hinterland. For the past hour they had been busy dealing with their disobedient faces, but now, no matter how busy they were, they could not control it. The monsters that filled the hinterland of the sky wasteland were of such a level that they did not even know if the human world could survive. But just as they were worried, they suddenly saw the crazy monsters pushing at least hundreds and thousands of monsters into the abyss in the process of their own people pushing. Suddenly, the fear subsided a lot. As for the 1,000 tyrant-class monsters, they did not come out, nor did they form, but turned into energy that surged throughout the sky wasteland. The dense energy almost turned the entire sky wasteland black, and this energy made the monsters even more irritable, and their numbers increased. Some of the restless noises behind him made Yun Nuoxing come back to his senses. He looked down at the many berserk demons that were formed by energy. His eyes surged with some silver-white light. A silver-white light appeared beside him. As he snapped his fingers, the light turned into a clear halo and exploded. In an instant it spread across the entire hinterland. Disintegrate! Pft! The sound of something leaking resounded loudly from below. The demons that had filled the entire hinterland suddenly turned into clumps of black energy and were cleared away in a few seconds. Only the black energy that had not been cleared away in time left behind evidence of what had just happened. Even the movements in the demonic abyss had calmed down a lot because of this. Compared to the scene of indiscriminate bombardment just now, Yao Guang and the others were even more shocked by the fact that hundreds of thousands of monsters were wiped out silently. They could not comprehend the power at all, and they could not comprehend the means of attack at all. It was a scene that they could not comprehend at all. They thought that they would not be scared to see how they would attack again. However, the scene before their eyes still made them look at it with surprise and a little admiration. The energy suppression of the demonic abyss is not complete. Other than the 1,000 tyrants that have disappeared, there is still a huge energy source that is constantly moving below. We did not care about the scene just now. He turned around and said to Yun Nuoxing, "What do you think? Do you want to go down and take a look?" "We are fine." Yun Nuoxing shrugged casually, then turned to look at Yao Guang and the others and said, "But they will be scared out of their wits, right?" Ahem. Hui coughed softly, put his hands on his waist, and shouted to everyone, "No one has ever done it before. There is only one chance in history. Are you going to jump into the demonic abyss or not?" Everyone turned their heads to look at the demonic abyss that was still emitting black energy. They looked at Hui, who had the word reliable written all over his face, and then looked at Yun Nuoxing, who was silent and quiet like an ice beauty. Suddenly they trembled. Although the two of them looked very powerful, they still had an innate instinctive fear of that place. Yun Nuoxing understood from their expressions and nodded. "Hui, you stay up there and protect them. I will go down and take a look." You want me again? Okay, don't look. I will stay. You be careful." Hui turned around unwillingly until Yun Nuoxing stared at him, as if he was looking at a maggot. Then, he laughed dryly and agreed. Yun Nuoxing exhaled softly and brought her people to a place dozens of meters away from the demonic abyss. Hui followed her and used his energy barrier to protect everyone inside Yun Nuoxing's barrier. Then, he gave her a thumbs up and said, "Be careful." Yun Nuoxing nodded and was about to jump over when a clear and firm voice suddenly sounded behind him, interrupting his action. "I will go too." With a hint of surprise and astonishment, He turned his head with a 98% emotionless expression. He saw Yao Guang take a deep breath, as if to give himself courage. When he saw Hui looking over, he looked at him with a firm and courageous gaze, then took a few steps forward and said, "Can you bring me along? I want to take a look." Looking back at the situation in the demonic abyss, Yun Nuoxing hesitated for a moment and suddenly smiled. This was the first time she saw him smile. "It was very beautiful, courageous girl. Since that is the case, I will bring you along. Don't leave my side casually, otherwise, I may not be able to protect you." Hui coughed softly and winked at Yun Nuoxing with all his might. He threw a look that said, "You are carrying a girl on your back, but you still don't forget to flirt with girls." Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes and replied, "As the natives of this world, they have the right to know these things. This reason is sufficient, right? I don't care. You are attracting bees and butterflies even at this critical moment. Do you believe that this girl thinks that I am a girl?" Hui was stunned. Yes, this was a very fatal question. They did not introduce themselves, so the possibility of this was actually more than 60%. No, 80%. Yao Guang walked to Yun Nuoxing's side and was almost shoulder to shoulder with her. Suddenly, he felt that the atmosphere between the two of them was not right. When he turned his head, he saw that the two of them were blinking their eyes at a high frequency. It seemed that their eyelids were about to fall off. He could not help but be stunned for a moment and carefully said, "It's okay." Yun Nuoxing shook her head. Her fluttering hair stretched to the side and wrapped around her waist. After that, she turned into a comet and leaped high into the sky, falling into the demonic abyss. When the blond man heard the captain's scream slowly disappear from his ears, he could not help but dig his ears. "Captain, are you okay?" "Don't worry, Feng is protecting her. It's okay." Hui heard this and grinned. He patted the ground and sat down casually. "We will just sit here and wait. Actually, I also want to see what it is like down there. Sigh, you guys say that even the girls have the courage to jump down. Why are you guys cramping?" Everyone laughed dryly and lowered their heads. They dug into the ground and pretended that they did not hear anything. Their captain was indeed more daring than them. Otherwise, he would not have taken up this position when he was younger than them by a few years. Even those rumors. Oh, let's not talk about them. After Yun Nuoxing plunged into the demonic abyss with Yao Guang, the surging dark energy in the surroundings made him pull the girl closer to him. Only then did he realize that the scream had disappeared. He turned around and saw Yao Guang covering her mouth to prevent herself from screaming. Her eyes were wide open as she stared down. The calmness that she forced looked very funny. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Relax a little, don't worry." Yao Guang nodded. However, the nervousness and fear on her face did not subside. After all, this place was very dangerous. She did not think that she would jump down without thinking. In the demonic abyss, other than the dark energy fog, nothing could be seen for the time being. The power of the soul could not spread very far. The dark energy was preventing it from spreading. As for the origin energy, it moved twice when the demonic abyss appeared, indicating that it had a reaction. Now that he had jumped down, it was calm. This made him feel uneasy. It felt like a false alarm. He could not make sense of it. "Since we have jumped down, let's go and see what's down there." Yun Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief and pulled Yao Guang down faster. There was nothing in the demonic abyss for the time being. Well, about 10 minutes had passed. As he sped down, they fell faster and faster. His hair was pulled into a straight spear. However, he could not see anything except the dark energy fog. Yun Nuoxing threw a ball of energy down from time to time, but he did not feel anything coming back. The ball of energy dissipated after crossing layers of energy barriers and reaching the limit of distance. Before he jumped down, he left a teleportation coordinate on the ground. At this moment, he could clearly feel that he was getting farther and farther away from the coordinate. In other words, this was not a bottomless pit standing on the level of laws. It was not just a state of suspended state that made people mistakenly think that they were falling, but they were really falling very, very deep. The continuous dive had probably exceeded the speed of sound by many times. If they were in the atmosphere, they would probably burn the air due to the friction. He tilted his head and glanced at Yao Guang. The little girl was still calm, but this speed was probably almost the limit of her physical endurance. If they went any faster, she might feel suffocated, or she might not be able to breathe properly, or all the blood in her body might run to the back of her body. Yun Nuoxing hugged Jing Yuanji in front of him. Fortunately, the girl did not let go of his arm. He freed his right hand and patted Yao Guang on the head. The dark red energy circled around her body. Huh! Yao Guang was stunned for a moment. The suppressed expression on her face disappeared in an instant. The discomfort caused by the high-speed fall suddenly disappeared. Even the sound of the wind and the sense of weightlessness from the crazy fall disappeared. She could not help but look at Yun Nuoxing. He patted her head and then retracted his hand. He probably helped to eliminate that feeling, but she did not know how he did it. It seems that we are almost at the end. After throwing another ball of energy down, Yun Nuoxing suddenly spoke, interrupting Yao Guang's wild thoughts. She had been staring down for a long time, but she still could not see anything. She could not help but smile bitterly. I thought that the abyss was some kind of tunnel or something, and there were endless monsters hiding down there. Yao Guang looked at the dark surroundings and could not see anything. I didn't expect it to be a shaft. Endless demonic creatures, huh? Yun Nuoxing pursed his lips and muttered to himself for a while. The laws in the vicinity were so chaotic that it was unbelievable. The density of the dark energy was close to infinity, which meant that it could be considered infinite. The power of space and time, which should have existed, did not exist at all. There was only that dark energy. Maybe there is. The energy in this place is so dense to such an extent. If you say that there is no demon here, I will not believe it. Moreover, it should be stronger than all the demons you have seen. After diving for another minute or so, Yun Nuoxing had just exhaled when she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She quickly shouted, F***CK? Turn around! Yao Guang was stunned for a moment. Before she could react, Yun Nuoxing suddenly reached out and pulled her into her arms from behind. Bang! An inexplicable huge impact sounded at the bottom of the abyss, accompanied by a crisp sound. Yao Guang was stunned by the sudden impact. Even the power that eliminated the feeling in her body could not withstand the impact just now. She suddenly felt that the organs in her body were forced to move a distance away. She hoped that they could still function normally after finding a new place to live. F***CK. Yun Nuoxing cursed in the celestial realm. The situation just now happened too quickly. It was so fast that he did not have time to slow down. He was just protecting the two girls when he crashed into it. It was not a direct collision. The situation just now was like he was running forward on an endless plane, and the next moment, he was pressed against the wall behind him. The speed at which he was pressed against the wall was the same as the speed at which he was running. There was no time gap between the two situations. It was as if he was running forward and then turned around to smash himself against the wall. The problem was that there was no wall behind him just now. How could he reason this out? Fortunately, he had just used the rule lock on Yao Guang to keep her body relatively still. If she had crashed into the wall at the same speed as him, he might have had to rescue her. As for himself, since his body was made of energy, and it was not during his free time, he did not add any restrictions on his body. In other words, it was still an energy body. He had tried crashing into the ground at the speed of light, and this level was child's play. What happened? Yao Guang raised her head, a little confused. She supported herself with both hands on the ground. Nothing, just a little strange. You don't have to worry about it. Also, get up first and pull me out. Yun Nuoxing habitually wanted to shake his head, but he found that his neck was stuck. He was now embedded in the ground, and his whole body was in a straight line. Well, if Jing Yuanji was included, it would be a cross. Yao Guang lowered her head and found that her hands were pressing on Yun Nuoxing's chest. She could not help but be stunned. She quickly crawled to the ground beside her, and cooperated with Yun Nuoxing to pull her out of the ground. She quickly looked around vigilantly. The bottom of the demon abyss. It was dark. Other than her feet on the ground, she could not see anything. Yun Nuoxing patted the dust off her body and turned her head to find Yao Guang staring at her in a daze. Yao Guang's eyes were filled with a strange expression. This expression, this kind of gaze, this kind of situation instantly gave her goosebumps. "You're a man." Well, he did not have a hand to stop Yao Guang, but she still said it. Not only did she say it, but she also added, "But I can't see any male features. Adam's apple or something." Yun Nuoxing. You can't blame me if you can't see. Speaking of which, is this the time to talk about this? Yao Guang laughed dryly. She wanted to walk to the side to take a look at the situation elsewhere and relieve the awkwardness of the conversation. However, before she could take 2 steps, she realized that her waist was still tied by his hair. After thinking for a while, she walked back. Yun Nuoxing's thoughts moved, causing a few balls of energy to appear around her body. White light bloomed, but it was not enough to illuminate this place. It could only illuminate an area of 10 feet around them. Beyond that was the dark abyss, that they could not see anything at all. "If it's the shaft, should we find its edge first?" Yao Guang said. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. "This space is a conceptual space. You can tell this from the fact that we fell face down and landed on our back. If I'm not wrong, there shouldn't be any walls of the shaft. Moreover, there shouldn't be any edge to this space. It will change according to your thoughts and rules. It can be infinitely big or small. If you want to see something or trigger something, you have to rely on yourself to dig. Of course, dig is just a description. It might be easier to understand if you call it search." Yao Guang tilted her head. Her beautiful smiling face could not hide her silly cuteness. After listening for a long time, she concluded that she could recognize every word he said. However, when they were put together, she could only understand the phrase, infinitely big, infinitely small. She did not know what he was talking about at all. Yun Nuoxing turned around and saw her standing there with a silly smile. He also helplessly scratched his head. In short, you can think of this space as your own imagination. Forget it, don't encounter something that didn't make you silly, but let me make you silly instead. In short, just follow me. Okay. Yao Guang nodded. When she saw him walking forward, she lifted her feet to follow him. She looked at his fluttering clothes that she had never seen before. Suddenly, she reached out her hand and gently pinched a corner of it. The space at the bottom of the demonic abyss was in a state of absolute distortion. The scene that light could not illuminate was a crazy and bizarre place. Everything that he knew in the order space and the otherworld space did not exist. There was only endless distortion and collapse. It was a place that did not belong to order. If there was a limit to order, then the primordial gods were the beings that stood at the peak of order. And this place might be close to the peak of non-order. Perhaps it was similar to his current position in the order plane. The area that he illuminated with light was actually a stable domain of order that he had divided with his law and order. For the time being, he did not need to divide such a large space. Just this small space was enough. The energy concentration here was very high. It was abnormally abundant. However, it was energy that ordinary people could not use. He tried to analyze a little of the dark energy. His expression became more serious. It was another non-orderly energy that was completely opposite to the origin energy. However, He could not tell if it was the annihilation energy. It was a little different from the annihilation energy that he encountered in the secret artifact space in the realm of the god. All the dark energy was concentrated to the point of explosion. It felt like it would explode at any moment. If he casually threw any of the dark energy at it, he did not know if it would blow up the entire demonic abyss. Theoretically speaking, he felt that this should not be annihilation energy, but there was a point. First of all, its strength was very similar to annihilation energy, but its laws and order were not on the same level as annihilation energy. The former was on the same level as the origin energy, an existence that was the complete opposite of order. The two were on the same level with completely opposite existences, and this dark energy before him was clearly weaker on the non-order ladder, even if it was powerful enough. Maybe it's because of this reason that the origin energy only trembled a little and then stopped moving? Yun Nuoshing murmured in his heart. He shook his head. After wandering in this dark space for a few minutes, Yun Nuoshing suddenly had a strange feeling. Ever since he left the capital, the haunted feeling had disappeared. Now, it suddenly appeared again, and it was unusually clear. Who's there? Yun Nuoshing suddenly turned around and looked at the dark space behind him. What's wrong? Yao Guang was shocked by his reaction and subconsciously moved closer to him. The two of them were almost stuck together. In this dark and ghostly place, he suddenly turned around and said that. It felt as if something was following behind him. Yun Nuoshing ignored her for the time being. He spread out his soul energy and circled around his surroundings. He felt that the haunted feeling was getting clearer and clearer. Even his spirit and consciousness were about to connect with something. Phew! When will we reach the end of this dark corridor? Sister Jing, is there really an end to this path? The energy mark is always behind us. We've been walking in a straight line all this time. How much longer do we have to walk? Keep going until we reach the next intersection. The consciousness maze should also be at the edge of consciousness. This time, Yun Nuoshing clearly captured it. It was Jing Yuanji's voice. Moreover, it was a continuous series of voices. So, the haunted feeling was caused by this girl. And this time, there was another voice. It seemed to be that girl's voice. Yun Nuoshing suddenly felt speechless. This abyss. What was it for? Chapter 1438. When she opened her eyes, she realized that she was floating in the air. She had experienced this feeling once before. It was when she followed that deceiving big brother to the place called the Great Ocean, called the Void. It was as if she was in a place where she could not feel anything, but she could clearly feel that there was something around her. Dao Tian opened her eyes and stared blankly at the gray space around her. It was gray without any color. The world seemed to have faded into meaningless gray. Even the colors on her body had blended into this eternal gray. She looked at her hands for a while and then at her clothes. After confirming that they were all gray, she stretched and used 3 seconds to wake herself up. Then, she began to think. Where was she? In her memory, she should be fighting with that big brother and big sister in the spirit-gathering continent, repelling the chaotic tide. She should have used up all her spiritual energy and fainted. After that, there was a short period of blurry feeling. She could feel that she was being carried by the big brother. She didn't know where they were going. Could this be the destination? This gray place, could it be their people? Dao Tian thought hard for a while. After eliminating the possibility that she was lost, abandoned, and so on, she felt that she should still be beside Yun Nuoshing. Even if she was sleeping, she could still feel his breath. So, all the above ideas were impossible. Then, the only possibility was that she had accidentally broken into this place. They went to a very troublesome place? Dao Tian frowned. She could not feel clearly when she was sleeping. She could only feel that they seemed to have gone to many places at once. Then, at a certain moment, her connection with Yun Nuoshing was suddenly cut off. Just like now, she was floating in this gray place, unable to find north, south, east, and west. Although she could still feel his breath from the bottom of her heart, there was no way to accurately pinpoint where they were. At this moment, her consciousness was suddenly awakened by a thought. She had an accurate idea. Dive. Dive. Dao Tian turned around and looked down blankly. It was still gray. Where was she supposed to dive? She did not care. Anyway, she would dive and see. Her consciousness controlled herself to slowly descend downward. This was only a thought, but she really began to slide downwards, silently streaking across space. This made her a little stunned, because at this moment, the dive was only a thought. She could clearly feel that she was moving on her own without putting into action. The sudden light coming from below made her ignore the thought that had stunned her for a moment. She turned around and touched the ball of light. Her consciousness returned. No, it was not that feeling. It should be that her consciousness had awakened. She opened her eyes and saw a dim space. The ceiling was a piece of metal engraved with many notches. There was a faint light coming from those notches, like the flickering stars in the night sky. The faint light came from all directions and illuminated the spacious space with dim light. It was a place where the walls, ceiling, and floor were all made of metal. It was like an airtight iron box. Yes, it was a can. Dao Tian rolled over and got up from the ground. She tidied up her messy platinum hair. From the corner of her eyes, she caught a glimpse of an opening under the wall in front of her. It seemed to be an opening to a passage. She was in a hall, an empty hall. The only visitor was her. No, it was her consciousness. She should only exist in this place with her consciousness. Well, my consciousness was forcibly pulled out of my body and floated to this strange place. After Dao Tian figured it out, she could not help but mutter in her heart, "Big brother, you really went to a strange place. Why did my consciousness disappear as soon as I woke up?" If her big brother could hear this, he would probably feel depressed. After all, he did go to strange places all the time. And every time, he would get into some abnormal, and disorderly things. At this moment, he was still wandering in the most dangerous place in the graveyard of gods and demons. Dao Heaven sighed. She felt that even though she had only known him for a short period of time, 100 days was really too short for them. She had the feeling that she had known him for a very long time. This was an illusion in her mind, or perhaps it was because she had come into contact with too many things in the short period of time that she had known him. Some of those things were even more important than the life that she knew at this moment. Putting those things aside for now, she wanted to try to escape from this space. But if she was just a consciousness, and one that was so far away from her body that she could not sense where her body was, she could not even borrow any power from her body. She could not use any unconventional methods to forcibly escape from this space. Then, she could only go down and take a look. She looked at the passage under the wall in front of her and took a deep breath. She lifted her feet and jogged. In the empty space, there was only the sound of scattered footsteps rising and falling, but there was no echo at all. It was the first time in her life that she had walked through a maze. In her life, which she had memories of, she had spent most of her time walking back and forth on ships with steel decks. She had crossed the galaxy and watched the big stars burn out. She had once thought that was the trajectory of her life that she could never change. Until someone suddenly appeared by her side and made her experience some other things. She also walked into this maze while he was at it. This maze was really boring. Dao Tian could not help but sigh. She had been jogging here for an hour. She had passed by more than 70 or 50 intersections and 2 spacious spaces that looked like halls. Then, she suddenly realized that she might not be able to get out of this complicated maze for a while. So, she stopped jogging. She walked step by step on the metal floor, holding on to the wall and moving forward. She planned to use the stupidest method, walking with her back against the wall. As long as the maze was closed and there were no other strange spaces, she would eventually reach the exit or enter the center of the maze. It was just that it took a little longer. However, for her consciousness, the flow of time was actually faster than the outside world. If she walked here for 10 days to half a month, only a few days would have passed in the space where her body was. Dao Tian paused, and her expression became very strange. What if it wasn't? Ever since she met that big brother, many things had become strange. Most of her cognition was in a state that needed to be fixed urgently. What if this place? But even if there was a gap in her perception of time, there was nothing she could do. She could only walk around in this maze with peace of mind. Instead of worrying about the big brother who was doing something in the outside world, it was better to get out of here quickly. Dao Tian stood in place and rested for a while. She looked ahead and saw a long, spacious corridor. The limit of her vision was a crossroad. Next, she would continue to turn right and keep moving forward. The many consciousness imprints behind her told her how long she had walked. Until now, she had not walked on any repeat path. This was not good news. It could only mean that this dark maze might be very big, and there was no way to determine how big it was. A few hours later, Dao Tian pushed open a door. This was already the 6th hall she had passed. Other than the place where she first appeared, the other halls looked exactly the same. The passageways were the same, and even the intersections were the same. She was already familiar with the monotonous layout. Even the glowing engravings on the walls and ceilings, as well as the engravings with unknown patterns, were so familiar that she could imprint them in her mind. Dao Tian suddenly paused. She looked at the hall in confusion. Looking at the 3 closed passageways in front of her, she subconsciously frowned. She did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt something unusual in this space. It was a feeling that she had not felt before. It was very strange, but because she was only a consciousness, she could not use the many senses of her body to sense what was unusual. When she wanted to sense it more carefully, the feeling suddenly faded away. It was like a dream. After waking up from a dream, the dream would quickly fade away. Consciousness can also produce illusions? She shook her head and was about to walk towards the passageway on the right. But when she was halfway through the hall, she suddenly hesitated. She turned around and walked towards the left passageway. She stretched out her hands and pushed open the door. In this dark place, time was easy to blur. Dao Tian suddenly forgot to accurately calculate her own time. She could only subconsciously leave traces of consciousness behind her, weaving sections of routes in her mind. It was not complicated. It was just a straight line. Turning left, turning right, repeating these 3 paths repeatedly. That was the result of her efforts during this period of time. Straightening out the distance, she might have walked around the equator of the first star of the path of the heavens for 600 laps, or 800 laps, or 1,200 laps. She could not remember. She had forgotten as she walked. It seemed that there was a section of the road where she did not leave any traces of consciousness. It seemed that she had left some traces, but she thought that she did not. She could not remember. Her consciousness was a little tired and blurry. Recently, she had stopped to rest for a longer period of time. She kept stopping and thinking about it. Sure enough, without a body and without a soul, it is a little difficult to keep remembering those things. Dao Heaven couldn't help but smile bitterly. She was only a sliver of consciousness in this world, and she didn't have a memory carrier. There were many things that would be forgotten after a flash of feeling from her consciousness. She was a bit stronger, and she could retain these fleeting feelings for a longer period of time. However, these weren't memories, and it was quite difficult to keep them coherent, clear, and repetitive in her consciousness. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a thing as subconscious. In truth, it was just a choice that came from the bottom of one's heart, a choice that came from one's subconscious. To turn this choice and feeling into a coherent memory fragment and forcefully engrave it into memory fragments was more than just a little difficult. In the beginning, it wasn't a problem, but as time passed, she almost couldn't remember it anymore. That feeling gradually disappeared from her consciousness, and once it was forgotten, she couldn't pick it up again. She was only left with a memory fragment that was flawed, but she could still rely on her own logic to fill in the gap. A brain is a good thing. It is very difficult for me to not have one now. Dao Tian grumbled and ended her rest. She patted her face and continued walking. Hold on a little longer. Just a little longer. By the way, this was a statement because she really did not bring her brain with her. She was just a consciousness. In the dark and empty passage, a considerable portion of Dao Tian's memory fragments had begun to fall behind. They were gradually erased by her subconsciousness. Gradually, she could not remember where she had walked to. The route in her memory had also become pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. She could not reach the front or back. The only thing she could be sure of was that she had not walked to any repeat path. No matter which piece of the jigsaw puzzle, there was no turning back. She kept walking forward, but she could not find the edge of the maze, nor the end of the maze. There was another thing that made her very uneasy. Recently, she kept feeling that there was something behind her. It was as if there was something else in this maze other than her. The first time she had this feeling was in the hall. Now, she did not know how many times she had this feeling. But when she stopped and looked back, she could not see anything. In the empty space, there was only the sound of her footsteps. In the dark and deep space, there was eternal loneliness. She could not see anything out of the ordinary. This feeling of scaring herself made her smile bitterly. To be honest, she would rather see something jump out in front of her. If it was an unknown object, she would drag it along. If it was another consciousness, she would beat it half to death before dragging it along, and so on. With a long sigh, Dao Heaven finished another round of rest. She stood up, leaned against the wall, and walked forward. When she saw the next intersection, she couldn't help but lower her head. Just as she was about to run forward, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. She heard another voice. Thud! It was really the sound of footsteps, and it was very clear. It came from the intersection in front of her. There really was another thing in this maze, and that thing was a little familiar to her. Her mind was filled with thoughts of rushing over, scaring, tailing, and knocking the person out. However, because she wasn't sure who it was, while she was hesitating, the footsteps got closer. She took a deep breath and rushed out. She opened her mouth and screamed, "Wait for me!" Aha! Two equally sharp screams suddenly echoed in the empty passage. At this moment, Dao Tian finally heard a clear echo, and she did not know if it was an illusion, but when they screamed, the light on the wall dimmed a lot. Oh right, in the end it was a charge scare. Speaking of which, what did they encounter that made them scream? What monster is doing here? Dao Tian? Hearing the thing clearly call out his name, Dao Heaven was taken aback. He hurriedly focused his gaze and saw a woman with light blue hair looking at him with a frightened expression. She kept patting her chest. "You scared me to death. Wait, why are you here?" Dao Tian was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she screamed and jumped into Jing Yuanji's arms. "Sister Jing." Seeing that Dao Tian jumped into her arms like a frightened little girl, Jing Yuanji could not help but smile bitterly. She was also shocked, okay? In this ghostly dark place, she was unprepared. Suddenly, a white figure jumped in front of her. She was so scared that she was ready to throw away her consciousness and run away. After the two girls met up, they talked about the situation during this period of time. After exchanging information, Jing Yuanji speculated that Dao Heaven had come in earlier than her, and she had gone further than Dao Heaven. After all, she had come in with half a soul, while Dao Heaven only had a consciousness. In order to preserve that hard-earned map, she had to spend a lot of time resting. When I woke up, I was already in this place. Jing Yuanji listened to Dao Tian and could not help but frown. The little girl did not seem to know that they had entered the graveyard of gods and demons, but she clearly knew that this place was related to the graveyard of gods and demons. But as for the specific relationship, one thing he could deduce was that if one fell asleep in the graveyard of gods and devils, their consciousness would be sent to this place. This should be the similarity between the two of them. Dao Heaven had fallen asleep before entering, and after waking up, he had been thrown into this consciousness maze. She had accidentally fallen asleep after entering, and then she had followed him in. She had even brought the consciousnesses of Lord Feng and the others with her. But why wasn't Qin Yu, little angel, and the others' consciousnesses present? Was it because they were not affected by Lord Feng's soul, and Dao Tian was thrown in because he was asleep? After thinking for a while, Jing Yuanji shook her head. She was not too sure about the relationship between the two. If we calculate the time, I have been in here for about 2 or 3 months. You might have been in here longer than me. Jing Yuanji patted Dao Tian's head and said softly. She looked at the dark tunnel in front of her. I've been walking non-stop these days, and I've gotten a feel for the situation. The space in this maze is infinite. There is no way back from any intersection, unless we turn around and walk backward. Jing Yuanji looked back at the tunnel behind her and frowned. We've fallen into a very troublesome place. If we want to get out, I'm afraid it will take a very long time. We might not even be able to get out. When Dao Tian heard this, he did not know what to say. After thinking for a while, he grinned. Big sister, be optimistic. The two of us will definitely be able to get out. Jing Yuanji smiled when she heard this. She looked at the space and thought for a moment. I have an idea. Perhaps we can get out. Or perhaps we can walk to the center of the maze and see what is hidden in the depths of this place. What idea? Dao Tian asked, then shook his head. No matter what it is, let's try it first. We've been walking for so long and haven't found any clues. Maybe we need to change our angle. Jing Yuanji nodded. When you walked through the maze, have you ever tried sticking to a wall? That's how I walked in the beginning. Dao Tian suddenly became excited. But there was no problem at first. Even after walking for a long time, I didn't see the next intersection. It's like when this idea was born, the intersection had already disappeared, right? Seeing his reaction, Jing Yuanji's thought was confirmed. What if we kept walking? Dao Tian thought for a while. I don't know. I gave up after walking for a day. Jing Yuanji. Then let's try. More or less, I understand. Yun Nuoxing contacted Jing Yuanji and Dao Tian at the bottom of the demonic abyss through who knows how many layers of space. Listening to the two girls complaining, mainly because Dao Tian was complaining, he felt a little uncomfortable and could not help but sigh. It's been hard on you. A maze of consciousness, huh? I still don't understand what's going on in this graveyard of gods and demons. How can you contact the bottom of the demonic abyss? According to my understanding, there shouldn't be any problems with your approach. What's left is a competition of patience. Yun Nuoxing met them in his mind and affirmed their decision to go all the way. I have a feeling that the level on your side is I can't say for the time being, I can't say for now. Jing Yuanji. A situation on those? Yun Nuoxing nodded. He frowned and sensed for a long time, as if he was doing some calculations. Jing Yuanji and Dao Tian did not interrupt him. After a while, they heard him sigh. There's no way to open the portal to the maze of consciousness from this space. The two spaces are not as simple as independence. There's something more complicated. It seems that you have to rely on your own strength to break through that maze. I'll try my best to open the seal on my side, if it has enough connection with the real world. Until then, you have to be careful in the maze. I don't think the space on both sides is that simple. Jing Yuanji nodded. The three of them looked at each other for a moment and fell silent. After a while, Jing Yuanji suddenly thought of a very important thing and quickly said, "Lord Feng, pay attention to your memory and recognition." Before Yun Nuoxing could finish listening, the figures of the two girls in his mind disappeared in an instant, which stunned him. Seal? Did she just say something that touched some kind of seal of some rules? Yun Nuoxing narrowed his eyes, revealing a smile that was not a smile, and nodded. Interesting. Chapter 1439. Before they could exchange more than a few words in their consciousness, they were forcibly cut off because of the alert of this world's consciousness. It was as if they had inadvertently said something fatal. After a while, he came back to his senses and quickly understood the reason behind it. He just didn't know if Jing Yuanji and the others would panic. They stayed in the consciousness maze. But it was useless even if he was worried. The labyrinth of consciousness should be a space, guarded by complex and unfamiliar rules. It was an independent space similar to the spiritual world. In this world, the only one who could create such a level of world was the demonic shadow that made a squeaking sound at the beginning. As for the demonic abyss, he was not sure if its original existence was used to hide a large number of demons. But this feeling made him speculate that the bottom of the demonic abyss was a weak point between the labyrinth of consciousness and the real world. Just like the barrier between the demon world and the realm of the gods in the northern wilderness, even if the two worlds were separated by a very strong barrier and could not communicate, there would always be one or two weak points for people to exploit. For the time being, he believed that the bottom of the demonic abyss was like that. The connection was made, but they accidentally talked about something that should not be said. The ruler of this world was too agitated and kicked them out of the room, according to the information obtained from Jing Yuanji. Well, that was all, and it was not useful at the moment. As for what she was going to say, he was more concerned about what she wanted to say that touched the taboo. One is memory, the other is recognition. Recognition of what? Did I hear the wrong syllables or something? Yun Nuoxing frowned in distress. There was no hint or connection. Even if he guessed the recognition or something, he might not know which was the answer. Yao Guang had been standing next to him in a daze. After a while, he suddenly saw a gloomy look on Hao Ren's face. He blinked curiously and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Yun Nuoxing came back to his senses, sighed and shook his head. "Nothing, I just thought of something. I was thinking about it just now and I felt a little headache." Yun Nuoxing stood in place and sorted out her thoughts for a while. Then, she let out a long sigh of relief. "Let's walk around here." Mei Mao Yao Guang flapped her fan, nodded, and followed him. She felt that something must have happened to him that she couldn't understand, because that daze was too focused. That's right, he was so focused that it didn't seem like he was thinking about anything. He only started to think and organize after his daze. He was probably thinking and organizing something that he had just seen. It was very similar to someone she knew. However, she didn't say anything, nor did she ask. She knew that there were some things in this world that couldn't be known, especially for people like her who weren't strong enough. After walking around in the abyss for half an hour, Yun Nuoxing kept trying to contact Jing Yuanji and the others, but to no avail. He decided to leave this place with Yao Guang. Seems like this is the end of this place. Yun Nuoxing turned around to look at Yao Guang. Suddenly, he saw two fist-sized balls of light floating in the darkness behind him. He couldn't help but be stunned. When Yao Guang saw him, she was also stunned. She also turned around and both of them were stunned. Perhaps it was because she was already nervous in the abyss. Yao Guang reacted in an instant. She pulled out her broken sword and swung it at the space in front of her. A cold light bloomed, but she didn't feel anything. Her expression changed, but the two balls of light that looked like eyes suddenly disappeared. Impulsive girl. Yun Nuoxing didn't expect Yao Guang to react so quickly. He lowered his head and saw that Yao Guang had already stopped. He looked at the space in front of him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You've alerted the things in the abyss." Yao Guang was taken aback and subconsciously took a step back. Her expression became slightly flustered, as if it was just as he had said. She felt that something was slowly moving in this dark space, and a myriad of hostility was being exposed from the space, oppressing them. "We get ready for a big one," Yun Nuoshing roared in her soul. She didn't care if the guy above had received it or not. She curled her hair and pulled Yao Guang up to the sky. "Let's go." When the two of them made their moves, the dark energy that had been accumulating at the bottom of the demonic abyss for countless years suddenly surged like boiling water. Waves of energy that could destroy the balance of the world surged, chasing after the two of them like maggot. Yun Nuoshing's expression turned serious. The mark of origin on his body lit up with a dazzling light. It seemed that even if the demonic abyss was just a misconception, the power of origin would still instinctively react to this kind of power that was definitely not on the side of order. He even couldn't control his own power for a moment. His body paused for a moment, allowing the boiling dark energy to rush in front of him. After that, the dark energy brought the collapsing energy right in front of him. God knows how many times it changed in the darkness. It didn't even know what it turned into as it rushed towards them. "Stay behind me and don't move." With a flick of his hair, he threw Yao Guang behind him and wrapped Jing Yuanji behind him. Yun Nuoshing stretched out his hand with an incomparably dignified expression. Just as he was about to urge his own energy, he suddenly found that his right hand was surging with an unusually dazzling color, causing him to be stunned. Just as he was feeling bewildered in his heart, his right hand pointed forward. Red, black, green, blue, and other colors of energy covered his arm, and then in the next moment it suddenly exploded. A vast amount of energy that he could not control suddenly burst out. A dazzling energy beam burst out from the palm of his hand. In less than a second, an indescribable destructive energy burst out from the abyss and pierced through the clouds. Boom! After receiving the news, Hui, who was hovering in the sky and gathering energy, suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. Before he could react, a dazzling energy of 1,000 feet in size shot up into the sky from 10 feet in front of him. The huge energy caused the entire space to shake violently. He was pushed back a distance by the sudden impact of the majestic and mighty energy, and the energy he gathered dissipated. "What the F***ck? Origin energy? Feng blew up the abyss?" Yun Nuoshing was also looking at his hand with a dumbfounded expression. The path that was blocked by the dark energy in front of him was suddenly unobstructed. The energy that had just erupted had purified the surrounding dark energy. At this moment, his vision was incomparably clear. Even the dark energy below had dissipated a lot. Yao Guang looked at this scene in a daze. He looked at the bottom of the abyss and then looked at the top. He could actually see the bright sunlight from the entrance of the abyss. In that instant, all the dark energy in the area was completely purified. The feeling of his arm being controlled disappeared in the next second. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand, and the origin energy instantly stopped moving. However, his right hand that had just erupted with the origin energy suddenly felt uncomfortable. There was a weak tearing and swelling pain. He couldn't help but frown. Although the origin energy was powerful and had the highest destructive power against non-order energy in the Deyuan realm, every time he used it, his body would be damaged. That's not right. He didn't want to use it. It was the B***tch that activated it. Sure enough, the essence of the origin energy had done something to it. It even automatically counterattacked. He had never used such a skill before. However, using the origin energy this time was much better than the first and second time being tormented by the origin energy. The last time he used the origin energy, he suffered a heavier backlash. It was probably because his body was starting to adapt to this kind of energy. From a long-term perspective, this should be a good thing, right? Let's go before the energy recovers. He curled his hair and carried Jing Yuanji on his back, then pulled Yao Guang, and Yun Nuo's star rushed upwards. After this disturbance, the energy of the demon abyss, and even the dark energy wandering in the wilderness of heaven wasteland, would weaken a lot. However, the signs of demonic creatures gathering would not change in a short time. This was the matter of the people of this world, and he could not care so much. Before they got out of the abyss, Yun Nuoxing's eyes caught a glimpse of a figure waving his hand outside the abyss. He looked at the direction, and the power of space surged and teleported out with Yao Guang. Hui felt the power of space fluctuating beside him. He moved aside a little and turned his head to see Yun Nuoxing and the others emerging from the space. Feng, I thought something happened to you down there. You even used the origin energy. It's just a small matter. It's not a big deal. As for the origin energy. Hearing him mention the origin energy, Yun Nuoxing was a little depressed. Damn it, I didn't want to use it. It was the origin energy that moved by itself. It's okay. It's just a small matter. Yun Nuoxing sighed and quickly explained the matter of him contacting Jing Yuanji through his soul. Only then did he look around. The origin energy erupted from the demon abyss, and the huge energy impact made the already dilapidated terrain of the heaven wasteland wilderness even more dilapidated. This place had been tossed into a scene after a disaster broke out, and it was not known if those monsters would climb out of the ground. Yao Guang also looked at the infinite wasteland that had changed greatly. His pretty face twitched. If this matter is written in the report, the higher-ups probably won't admit it, right? Well, if we write it together, it's probably okay. But to talk about what happened. The leader of the other team hesitated. Then, everyone looked at Yun Nuoxing. After a moment, they all smiled bitterly. Forget it, forget it. We can't afford to offend this ancestor. Instead of letting them trouble him, it's better to let those fellows who have doubts come and take a look themselves. In the past, there would be many traces of battle in the infinite wasteland. But this time, the damage to the hinterland was too severe. Even the central circle and the border near the east were not lightly affected. The huge cracks that were hundreds of feet wide could not be covered up. The infinite wasteland did not have the ability to repair itself. Yao Guang looked at the open demonic well behind him. Mei Mao narrowed her eyes. The demonic well was no longer spewing out energy. There was still some energy at the bottom of the demonic well, but it would take a long time for it to return to its original state. The energy reaction of the abyss has decreased to the lowest level. The energy in the infinite wasteland will probably decrease layer by layer. After this incident, almost 90% of the demonic creatures in the hinterland have died. The pressure from the infinite wasteland wilderness is estimated to be 90% less than before. There won't be any movement for many years. This is great news. The golden-haired young man said. What's the pressure from the infinite wasteland? Yun Nuoxing and Hui walked over from the side. They were curious when they heard their conversation. Everyone looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. Yao Guang was used to the situation where this overly powerful lord did not know anything. He took the initiative to explain, the infinite wasteland is the northernmost part of the continent. At the same time, it is also the closest location to the center of the continent. The lingering energy in the infinite wasteland gathers together and can easily breed demonic creatures. The overproduced demonic creatures will condense a large area of domain, which will expand their sensing range of energy. When the amount of energy gradually increases to the point where they can sense the aura of life outside, the demonic creatures will form a wave, and then they will attack the place that belongs to the order region, right? Yun Nuoxing nodded to show that she understood. This is also one of the key observation factors for your exploration? Yao Guang also nodded. In addition to observing the number of demonic creatures in the infinite wasteland to determine the situation, there is another reason: to come regularly to clean up a certain number of demonic creatures that have gathered. Yun Nuoshing and Hui exchanged a glance with each other, and couldn't help sighing inside. It's the nature of being born out of nothing again. From the dark energy to the abyss death fog and the chaotic tide caused by the twisted races, it seems that the creations derived from these things could transform all the energy in the energy field and create similar energy creations out of nothing. In their words, it's a very cheap, disgustingly simple but highly efficient way to create soldiers. Although they could only create cannon fodders, when these cannon fodders were replaced by fine cannon fodders, senior cannon fodders, and more advanced cannon fodders, whose quantity was multiplied by trillions, well, it became the current situation in the Eight Elements realm. The cannon fodders of the netherworld could kill the middle and lower planes by throwing out cannon fodders. Then, they would invade the upper planes and turn the entire Eight Elements realm into a mess. What's more, the netherworld could destroy the middle and lower planes by throwing out cannon fodders. After that, they would invade the upper planes and turn the entire Eight Elements realm into a mess. Other than the infinite wasteland, there should be other places that have this level of demonic creatures, right? Hui asked. The infinite wasteland alone should not be able to annihilate the power of order in this world. Everyone looked even more surprised, but this time their eyes calmed down. In short, the other party was very powerful and had saved their lives. As long as these two natures did not change, they could ignore all the incomprehensible situations of these two ancestors. Yao Guang already had such an idea, so he did not think about anything and directly said, "The infinite wasteland at the northern end of the continent is one of the most powerful demonic creatures. The other places, across the West Pole Sea and the East Mountain Range, there are two largest demonic creatures on both sides. However, the demonic creatures born there are only unusually large numbers, and there are no particularly powerful individuals. Therefore, the alert level is not particularly high in normal times. These two places will launch a demonic creature to hit the continent every 10 years, crossing the sea and the mountains to rush to the world where humans live. As for the infinite wasteland, there will be a demonic creature attack every 3 years. It is already the 3rd year since the last demonic creature attack in the infinite wasteland. The demonic creature attack will happen in less than 100 days, and every time, it will cause extremely serious damage to the world where humans live. Oh, those 1,000 tyrant-class monsters were prepared for this." Yun Nuoshing let out a long oath. Yao Guang smiled bitterly. Logically speaking, this should be the case, but they were all killed by you in the demonic abyss. Thinking of this, she suddenly looked at him and said seriously, "If that's the case, this year's demonic creature attack might have ended early. The other two demonic creatures attack once every 10 years, and they come together. It has just been the 4th year, so there won't be any major incidents. Because of this, we have more time to breathe." Time to breathe, huh? Yun Nuoshing muttered to herself. This was a world that was plagued by long and incoherent wars. Every once in a while, the demonic creatures would invade the world of order. The creatures of order in this world had been fighting against the dark energy and monsters for a long time. They had even organized a set of highly effective methods to fight against them. However, even so, the power of order was still weak, and there was no way for them to completely resist the dark energy. That was nonsense. This was an energy that was as powerful as the annihilation energy. It was just that the non-order energy was weaker. For such a level of energy to exist in this world, it was simply a miracle that it could produce life. Moreover, the creatures of order in this world weren't that strong. From Yun Nuoshing's point of view, they were a little too weak. They were probably about the same as the creatures in the 3 elemental realms. However, the rules of the elemental realm were still the rules of the 8 elemental realm, Since there was no need to go deep into this world, there was no need for him to have a deep understanding of this world. These slightly more important things were also discussed briefly. He summarized all the information in one sentence: there was a troublesome thing in this world that was causing trouble. It was probably the demonic shadow that was sealed by the distorted races. Perhaps it took the initiative to cause trouble, or perhaps it did it unintentionally. But no matter what, it had left something that wasn't good for the world of order. In fact, he had reason to believe that the higher-order origins of the distorted races might have disappeared from this world. Actually, he hoped that they had already disappeared. After all, that was a group of higher-order origins. He had to be vigilant to deal with them. If he encountered them in this world, he might just sink this world into the void. Putting all these aside, objectively speaking, this was a bad world. It was as bad as the spirit land and the outside world. Seeing that Yun Nuoxing was suddenly in a daze, Yao Guang couldn't help but ask, "What are you going to do next?" "Us? We said before that we were going to the northern temple. Of course, it's time to return to the team. They should have left the everlasting plains by now." Yun Nuoxing looked up and answered for a while before lowering her head. "What's wrong?" Yao Guang shrugged. "We still have to follow you to cross the everlasting plains. We're just asking if you have any plans." After that, she looked back at everyone. "Let's go to the northern temple first. We'll turn back when the time comes." "That's not a problem. We still have plenty of food and water. Can last for many days." The blonde youth nodded. The others had the same idea. They were even a little expectant. "We actually haven't seen what the northern temple looks like. It's a good thing if we can see it." As they said that, everyone laughed as if they had recovered from the nightmare of the disaster. "Well, if you don't have any objections, let's go. This journey, well, it's still a little far." Yun Nuoxing shrugged and swung her long hair. She took over the control of the energy barrier and flew up into the sky with everyone. We followed beside her and kept looking at the ground. He couldn't help but say, "The destruction is a little serious. The entire everlasting plains is cracked. I guess even the edge of the everlasting plains is affected." Hearing that, the blonde youth pondered for a while and whispered, "Actually, we hope that you can just smash it. Then there would be no worries, right? One of the three origins of the demonic tide would be missing." Yun Nuoxing laughed. Everyone nodded seriously. That was the whole world. That was a great thing. They wouldn't have to risk their lives to come to this godforsaken place every time. But that was just a thought. They didn't dare to ask why they didn't just smash it. Anyone with a brain wouldn't say that kind of talk, probably wouldn't say it. Seeing the complicated expressions on everyone's faces, Yun Nuoxing and Hui looked at each other and shrugged. With their eyesight, they could tell what these youngsters were thinking. So they said casually, "Although we can't smash the everlasting plains directly, there might be another way to make the demonic tide disappear. Do you believe it?" A way to make the demonic tide disappear. Everyone was stunned. And completely disappear. As long as we succeed, there will be no more demonic tide in the world. Yun Nuoxing said seriously. Yao Guang imagined that kind of scene. A world without the influence of the demonic tide. Such a world might be beautiful. But, does that method really exist? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.